Chapter 324. Aphrodite blinked and said, "That's right. One punch to the nose, the other to the stomach, and then the other to the head. What kind of moves are these? Ammon is a god, after all, and he knows etiquette. If the opponent is a woman, he can't possibly do the same, right?" Yelena asked in return, "Even if he uses a different method, can you block it?" The goddess of justice and fairness, Themis, suddenly interrupted from afar, "If you want to know the answer, you can try challenging him yourself." "But Aphrodite, I have to remind you that it's not a romance, it's a fight. Don't misunderstand the situation." Aphrodite sighed again. "Fighting and killing is so boring. I still prefer to talk about love. I'm not Apollo, I have my own ways." "Yes, yes." Yelena reminded, "Ammon saw Apollo's weakness. Otherwise, he wouldn't have lost so badly. In our camp, Apollo, who has the strongest combat power, can no longer participate in this matter. Aphrodite, don't overestimate your charm. You can't tempt a god like Ammon. Even if you can tempt him and have sex with him, do you think Artemis will let you go?" The gods of the Olympus pantheon obeyed the oath that they couldn't fight each other directly, but it didn't mean that there wouldn't be conflicts. If Aphrodite angered Artemis, the goddess of the hunt would hand her bow to a powerful messenger and set a trap for Aphrodite. Even the goddess of love and beauty wouldn't be able to handle it. Aphrodite said with a regretful expression, "A god like Ammon, such a man, is a temptation and a challenge to me. If I were to be in a relationship with him, it would be an achievement and enjoyment. But I thank you for your reminder. The goddess of wisdom's words are never wrong. I won't face Ammon directly, so what should I do?" Yelena thought for a while and said, "To defeat someone, you don't need to use your fists. Everyone's weakness is different. To defeat someone, you don't need to fight him directly. Aphrodite, if you really want to banish Ammon, I have a suggestion that will help you." No one could hear what the goddess of wisdom said next. No one knew what idea the goddess of wisdom gave to Aphrodite. Medanzo followed Ammon down the mountain. On the official road on the outskirts of Macedonia, people and carriages came and went. Ammon stopped singing and walked forward with his hands behind his back. Medanzo couldn't help but whisper, "My God, you are really amazing. Why did they happen to find a god's tear? I'm afraid you're the only living craftsman in this world who has mined this kind of god's stone, and you've actually mined 2 of them in a row." Ammon smiled. "I'm not that lucky. I've only opened a few ore cores today. If I can mine a god's tear like that, it would be too much. Don't forget that I already have a god's tear in my hands. Maria left it for me. I've given all my artifacts to my disciples, but only this one is left to follow me in and out of the heavenly kingdom." Medanzo suddenly realized something and exclaimed in his soul, "So that's how it is. No wonder. The ore core that Ammon opened was a fake one, but it was made to look like the real one by this excellent craftsman. He put his god's tear in it." When Apollo was distracted and talking, Ammon took out the ore core and created an accident. Apollo was unlucky. Although Ammon didn't like to play tricks, it didn't mean that he didn't know how to do it. If anyone wanted to bully an honest person like him, they were really messing with the wrong person. The ambush with just one ore core was quite beautiful. When the 2 of them walked through the gates of Macedonia, Medanzo asked again, "My God, can you really mine another god's tear? Alexander must have given you a lot of ore cores." Ammon replied calmly, "It's not impossible, but it's not my god's tear, it's Alexander's. All the parangons I mine, no matter what kind, will be given to the kingdom of Macedonia. I'll get 1 gold coin for each parangon stone." The kingdom of Macedonia successfully occupied the holy land of Hilton, Delphi. Philip II left 1,000 men of the Delphi Legion to guard the Holy Land and led the army back to the Kingdom of Macedonia. On the way back, he, conveniently, took a detour and conquered many city-states near Delphi. Macedonia's conquest this time was not quite the same as the alliance of the city-states in history. Instead of being the leader of the alliance, these city-states were directly incorporated into the territory of Macedonia. The citizens' assemblies of these city-states still remained, and they usually decided the internal affairs of the city-states. However, the city-states were subject to the unified governance of Macedonia. Their written language, laws, taxes, and weights were all the same. At this time, three powers had formed on the Hilton Peninsula. The Kingdom of Macedonia in the north, the Gabados Alliance and the Eurone Alliance in the south were evenly matched, and the Eurone Alliance had become the weakest. Eurone and Gabados finally panicked, so they stopped attacking each other and sent messengers to negotiate the establishment of a new alliance in an attempt to fight against Macedonia together, but it was too late. The Kingdom of Macedonia had a larger territory and a larger population, and its national power was stronger. It could recruit more trained warriors, and it could also recruit more warriors from the strong ordinary people. After Philip II returned, he divided the elites of the original Delphi Legion into three, and formed two new legions on the basis of this backbone. Each new legion was formed by Alexander, who was responsible for specific training exercises. When a new legion was basically formed, another legion would be formed, and Alexander would be transferred to be the commander of the legion. If someone else played this role, it might be a gift to someone else. They would have to personally form the legion, train the soldiers, and then hand them over after they had formed a combat power. But for Alexander, there was no such problem. Philip II's intention was obvious. In the future, the huge Macedonian army would be under Alexander's command and control, because it was formed by the hands of this prince, and the generals who grew up in battle were also the direct descendants of Alexander. Many people speculated that after Macedonia occupied Delphi and the surrounding city-states, would they take the opportunity to take revenge on Eurone? But Philip II's actions surprised everyone. Half a year later, he went to war again and led his army south to attack the Gabados alliance. Gabados was the main force on the Hilton Peninsula that could still fight against Macedonia. Philip II was very accurate. The main force of Eurone was the navy, while the main force of Gabados was the army. If they attacked Eurone along the coastline, the army of Gabados could help, but if they attacked the Gabados alliance by land, the navy of Eurone could not help. The battle was fierce at the beginning. The Gabados warriors were brave and good at fighting. Facing the attacks of the Macedonian phalanx and the two flanks of the cavalry, they fought a few tough battles. But the number of Gabados warriors was not large to begin with, and under continuous consumption, they gradually could not resist. Once the tide of battle turned, the attack of the Macedonian army became a destructive force. Philip II attacked Gabados first because of very practical considerations, because the Gabados alliance was not a community of interests. As long as the powerful Gabados army was defeated, the other city-states in the alliance could surrender without fighting. The Gabados alliance was maintained by the powerful force of the Gabados warriors. In fact, it was an alliance that the Macedonians conquered and enslaved other city-states. The brutal rule and exploitation of the Gabados had long caused the other city-states within the alliance to rebel. As soon as the Gabados army was defeated, the city-states almost took the initiative to welcome the arrival of the Macedonian army. The Macedonian army fought all the way to the city of Gabados. The Gabados, who had no way out, vowed to defend their city-state and fight to the end. If they attacked the city of Gabados, they were bound to suffer heavy casualties, and they might even be attacked by the Eurone people. Philip II made a decision. The attack on Gabados would end here, and the city of Gabados would be left to fend for itself. The citizens of the city of Gabados did not do production. They were trained for the purpose of military conquest, and survived by conquering and enslaving other city-states. Now that most of the Gabados warriors had been lost, all the conquered territories were lost, and only their own city-state was left. If they were pushed too hard, the Gabados would fight to the end under the threat of destruction, which would not be good for Macedonia. The Kingdom of Macedonia had achieved its strategic goal of dissolving the Gabados alliance, and the city of Gabados would close its doors and fend for itself. Macedonia had occupied 2/3 of the territory of the Heaton Peninsula, and a small isolated city of Gabados could no longer pose a threat to it. The remaining Gabados warriors might still have the courage to defend the city, but they were no longer able to counterattack. After dissolving the Gabados alliance and leaving only the isolated city of Gabados, Philip II took the opportunity to mobilize his army to attack Euron. This battle was different from the attack on Gabados. The Euron alliance was a community of interests united by commerce and trade. Philip II appeared as an avenger rather than a liberator, so the other city-states joined forces to fight. The Macedonian army needed to nibble away step by step, and it could not be decided in a single battle. Philip II first captured a port city-state along the coastline, cutting off an important sea supply line of the Euron alliance, and then avoided the Euron navy and took a detour inland, occupying city-states one by one. Macedonia became stronger and stronger, and the Euron alliance became weaker and weaker. In the end, only a few important city-states were left, and they struggled to survive by relying on the transportation links between them and naval support. Philip II was not in a hurry. The newly occupied territory needed to be consolidated and digested, and the situation of Macedonia unifying the entire Hetan Peninsula was irreversible. He had to prepare for the next strategic goal and build a stronger Macedonian army. Philip II led the army to battle, and news of victory kept coming. Alexander, who stayed in the capital to supervise the country, also handled the daily military and political affairs well with the assistance of his ministers. He recruited soldiers in the new territory and formed 2 more legions. This time, he did not continue to serve as the commander of the legion, but gave the task of forming and drilling the new army to his trusted subordinates. The young Alexander served as the commander of 3 legions, and his trusted subordinates formed the other 2 legions. The prince soon ushered in the most important event since he became the regent, and that was the annual Delphic oracle ceremony. Now that Philip II was leading the army to war, Alexander would preside over the ceremony on behalf of the Kingdom of Macedonia. This year's Delphic oracle would still be arranged by the Apollo Temple, and the location of the chief priest would be the Apollo Temple in Delphi. There was a process for history to change. Although Macedonia had occupied the Holy Land of Delphi, it had not been long since they took over, and many things still needed the support of the local priest group. Therefore, they did not immediately order a change in the form of the Delphic oracle, and it was still arranged by the Apollo Temple. In the future, when the Kingdom of Macedonia had full control of the situation, and when the traditional priest group of Delphi no longer had the power to oppose, it was estimated that this period of history would truly change. Alexander, who was not even 20 years old, had to preside over such an important ceremony, and it was for the entire Hetan Peninsula. He was very excited for the grandest ceremony. Alexander's court tutor, Aristotle, of course had to accompany him and teach the young prince all the necessary etiquette for the ceremony. Madanzo also went, and Alexander begged him to go with him. During this time, Alexander and Madanzo had a closer relationship, and Madanzo often accompanied him to inspect the army, practice battle formations, and teach him all kinds of things during hunting and field trips. Such an important ceremony, and also to invite the important people of the kingdom, whether or not some people would go, Alexander had to invite them as a form of etiquette. Ammon also received an invitation from Alexander in his personal capacity to attend the Delphic oracle ceremony, but Ammon politely refused. The reason why Ammon refused Alexander was very simple. If he really went, then the first Delphic oracle ceremony hosted by the Kingdom of Macedonia would be ruined. Ammon had defeated Apollo in a duel, and if he went to Delphi, then all the avatars that Apollo had placed on the statue of Delphi would have to retreat, and it would be impossible for him to send down an oracle. Unless the priest removed the lie and forged the oracle, the ceremony would become a joke, and whether the oracle really appeared or not, the supreme mages present would be able to sense it. However, Ammon agreed to let Madanzo accompany Alexander. The Kingdom of Macedonia had just conquered many cities, and the situation was not completely stable yet. In such a complicated situation, with Madanzo around, Ammon could rest assured of Alexander's safety. On behalf of his father, the young Alexander led a guard of elite warriors of the Delphic Legion, accompanied by Madanzo, Aristotle, and the ministers to the Holy Land of Delphi. He received the representatives sent by the various cities to attend the ceremony, and then presided over the grand ceremony. Apollo sent down an oracle on behalf of the Olympian gods, blessing the young prince and all the Hydonians at the same time, and they would become a powerful country under the leadership of Macedonia. The glory of Macedonia reached its peak, and Alexander, who represented this glory, was even more glorious. He seemed to have become a figure comparable to the various heroes in history and legends. The mentality of a young man was always playful. After the ceremony, Alexander, who had finally come out, did not want to go back so soon. Philip II was not there, and now no one among the Macedonian ministers could control him. He ordered Aristotle to lead the Macedonian envoys and guards back first, while he disguised himself as a commoner and went to the various cities with Medanzo to broaden his horizons. Aristotle wanted to persuade him, but he could not, because he had once told Alexander that as a monarch, he could not only deal with government affairs in the palace. It was best to experience and think as a commoner, so that he could clearly understand how to make decisions. Now that Alexander really wanted to do so, he felt a headache. He was most worried about the safety of the little prince, but fortunately, there was Medanzo, so he could only carefully remind Medanzo. There was not much point in bringing a small guard, and it was easy to expose Alexander's identity. Since it was a private trip, it was impossible to follow with an army. It was best to have a powerful oracle like Medanzo protect him. Medanzo took Alexander to travel to the civilian cities. They were dressed like the common traveling sages on the Heaton Peninsula. Alexander was very curious about everything. He did not even know how to stay in a hotel, and he needed Medanzo to teach him everything. In fact, any teacher in the world could teach the little prince these things, but at this moment, Alexander felt that Medanzo was really knowledgeable, and he was very envious of his colorful experience. Alexander wandered outside for more than 2 months. If it were not for Medanzo persuading him to go back early, he would have played for a longer period of time. Although the prince was playful, he had not forgotten his responsibility. When he heard that Philip II was about to return to the court, he immediately decided to return to the city of Macedonia. At that time, Alexander and Medanzo were in Mytilene, and when they heard about the experience of Ammon helping the Macedonian envoys, they begged Medanzo to take them to walk that road again. Medanzo took Alexander to the mountain where the envoys were attacked, and he explained the course of events with great enthusiasm. Alexander was full of praise, and he wished that he could be the hero who caught the assassins. Just as the two were talking and laughing, a person appeared at the pass in the distance, walking gracefully along the mountain road. She was carrying a very large baggage, which did not match her delicate figure, and she looked very pitiful. When Medanzo and Alexander saw the person walking over, and it was a girl who traveled alone, they stopped talking and laughed at the same time and turned their heads to look. For a moment, they were both lost in thought, as if they were suffocating. This girl was too beautiful. She looked about 18 or 19 years old, wearing a light green gauze dress. Perhaps because she was in a hurry, there were fine beads of sweat on the tip of her nose and forehead. Her forearms were exposed outside the dress, and her skin was white and soft, as if it was the perfect work of the gods. Her eyes were clear and soft, with a deep and charming luster. Her waterfall-like hair was orange-red, slightly curling over her round and beautiful shoulders and white breasts. Chapter 325. The girl was hurrying through the mountains when she saw 2 men staring at her foolishly in the wilderness. With a wary look on her face, she put down the bag on her shoulder and stood still. She asked in a crisp voice, "Who are you?" Oh my God, her voice was so beautiful that even the soul resonated beautifully when it entered the ears. Her whole body felt strangely soft. The way she unwrapped her bag, the way she spoke, and the way she looked at him were all so lovely. Alessandro was still in a daze, but Medanzo reacted. He coughed lightly and said, "Girl, don't be afraid, we are not bad people, we are just passing by. You are a young girl, why would you come to this wilderness alone?" The girl saw that the 2 men in front of her were not fierce, and they were both young and handsome. Medanzo also spoke very kindly, so she replied, "I come from the city of Cyprus, and have prayed in the temple of Aphrodite for an oracle. Where can I find the hero in my heart?" The voice of the gods told me that I should go to Macedonia. The kingdom of Macedonia is about to unify the Hilton Peninsula, and it will also be the place where the heroes of the world will gather. Medanzo frowned slightly and asked again, I want to ask, why would you go to such a desolate wilderness alone? It is not peaceful here, and there have been attacks on the Macedonian diplomatic mission. For a beautiful girl like you, it is too dangerous. The girl suddenly smiled, reached out her hand, and took out a gleaming dagger from her bag. With a faint gleam of the sword, she waved it a few times. Her expression seemed to be showing off and warning. She slightly raised the corner of her mouth and said, I am not afraid, I can protect myself. Medanzo was shocked again. Such a beautiful girl turned out to be a 5th-level warrior. Ordinary thieves were indeed no match for her. Even if she were to kill 8 or 10 strong men, it would not be a problem. No wonder she dared to go alone on the mountain roads. The girl's skills also explained why she went to find the hero in her heart. It was quite rare for a woman to practice martial arts to this level, and she was such a beautiful girl. There must be many suitors around her. She should also yearn for legendary heroes. Medanzo had been spying on the girl with detection magic as he spoke, but he did not find anything unusual. She was a standard 5th-level warrior. When the lady brandished her sword, there was a hint of heroism in her flirtatiousness. There was also a hint of gentleness in her forcefulness. Medanzo felt his heart tremble. She was simply too beautiful. Her charm was indescribable. Great! We are going to Macedonia as well, so we can go together. What's your name, girl? Alexander finally recovered from his shock and asked with a silly look on his face. My name is Helen, what about you? Alexander. Metatro. Both of them answered almost at the same time. I'm Helen. I'm Helen. The name Alexander was not uncommon. It meant extraordinary man, while the name Medanzo was almost unheard of in the Heaton Peninsula. The girl put the dagger back into her bag and said with a smile, It's good that you're not bad people. Just now, I thought we met bandits. Since we are going the same way, let's travel together. You look like scholars. If you really meet bad people, maybe I can protect you. Did Medanzo and Alexander need her protection? But the two men thanked her at the same time. As Helen spoke, she was about to put the bag on her shoulder again. Medanzo and Alexander stretched out their hands at the same time and said, Miss, it's too heavy for a girl like you to carry such a big bag. Let me help. Helen was a warrior of the 5th rank. Not to mention carrying a bag, it wouldn't be a problem even if she carried both of them on her shoulders. But such a beautiful girl carrying such a big bag while the men on both sides were empty-handed was indeed not very suitable. Medanzo and Alexander grabbed the corner of the bag at the same time. The girl smiled and let go of the bag. Thank you. Alexander saw that Medanzo had grabbed the bag and was stunned for a moment before letting go. Medanzo carried the big bag, and the three of them continued on their journey together. Medanzo had not forgotten what had happened just now. On the way, he talked about the experience of Aristotle's diplomatic mission. But because Helen was present, he did not mention his name again. It was as if he was telling someone else's story. Helen was also very interested and would occasionally let out a bell-like laugh. From this moment on, the journey became beautiful and joyful. That day, they walked out of the mountains and came to town to stay for the night. In the past, Medanzo would be the one to look for the innkeeper, but today, Alexander took the initiative to run ahead and found the best inn and asked for the best 3 rooms. Just 2 months ago, this prince did not even know how to settle the bill, but today, he rushed to settle everything. It was dark after dinner, so the 3 of them went back to their rooms to rest. Helen's room was in the middle, while Alexander and Medanzo stayed on either side. For some reason, Alexander could not fall asleep. He always listened attentively to the movements next door, as if he could feel Helen's breath. Medanzo was sitting cross-legged in meditation when he suddenly heard the movements next door. Helen quietly walked out of the door and went downstairs. It's so late, what is she doing? Her movements were very quiet. Alexander did not have the power to awaken his bloodline. He was not a warrior, let alone a mage. He could not hear her, but Metatro could hear her very clearly. Not long after, Helen went upstairs again. She seemed to be carrying something in her hand. Listening to her footsteps, she actually came to Madanzo's room. Faint light shone through the crack in the door. Madanzo quickly got out of bed. At this moment, he heard a soft knock on the door. He opened the door and saw Helen carrying a plate and a lamp. She said shyly in a low voice, "You almost didn't eat anything tonight. You must be hungry. I've come to bring you something to eat." This girl was very attentive. Madanzo did not eat much during dinner. He had been telling stories with a smile on his face. Both Helen and Alexander were very happy listening to him. However, Helen noticed this detail. Sending delicacies to her room at night was really a warm and caring gesture. The next day, they continued on their journey, leaving the city of Medulla and entering the city of Olympios. Along the way, it was Madanzo who explained all kinds of things to Alexander. But today, Alexander was very lively and cheerful. He took the initiative to tell stories, introducing the Kingdom of Macedonia's military exercises and various anecdotes about the war. This was originally a man's topic, but as a fifth-level warrior, Helen was also very interested in it. From time to time, she would ask questions in a sweet voice and make all kinds of praises, greatly satisfying Alexander's vanity. In the afternoon, when it was time to sleep again, Madanzo did not eat much at first. As a ninth-level oracle, it did not matter whether he ate or not. But Helen gently reminded him, "You didn't eat much last night, so don't be hungry again today. Don't just talk, eat." Madanzo felt embarrassed not to eat. He could only drink the soup while stuffing the flatbread into his mouth. He thought to himself that he did not need Helen to bring him supper tonight. After dinner, Helen went outside for a walk before returning. When she returned to her room to rest, the sensitive Madanzo did not hear any unusual movements in her room. But he heard the sound of Helen opening the door and footsteps. Unexpectedly, she had come to his door. He quickly got out of bed and opened the door without knocking. Helen stood in front of the door with a new robe in her hand. She took a step back and said, "I haven't knocked yet. Why did you suddenly open the door?" Alexander said with a little embarrassment, "I heard your voice. Sorry, did I scare you? Hey, what are you holding in your hand?" "Oh, I was rude. Please come in and talk." Helen walked into the room. Alexander lit the lamp and asked her to sit down. The little prince, who had seen all kinds of big scenes, did not know why he looked a little uncomfortable. He rubbed his hands and said, "The room is a little messy and the things are very simple. You can just sit." Helen could not help but laugh. "Why are you so polite with me? This is the room of the inn, not your room." Alexander scratched the back of his head and laughed. "You are right." Helen handed the robe in her hand to Alexander and said, "Your clothes are torn. Change into this new one and give me the old one to mend. The road to Macedonia is quite long. You can't always wear a torn robe." After traveling outside for more than 2 months, the things Alexander brought with him were very simple. The robe he was wearing now was already torn. He and Madanzo did not care about these details at all. They came out to play as ordinary people. What did it matter if the robe was torn? But the attentive Helen noticed it. She was very concerned about Alexander. After eating, she specially went to the town to buy a new robe that fit Alexander's figure. Alexander hurriedly waved his hand and said, "What does it matter if a man's clothes are torn? How can I ask you to buy me new clothes?" Helen slightly pouted and said with a tone of annoyance, "Didn't you help me pay for the room and food these 2 days? It's only right for me to buy you clothes. Why don't I give you money? Quickly change out of this old robe. A man naturally doesn't know how to sew clothes." Of course, Alexander did not know how to sew clothes. Even if the clothes he wore were accidentally torn, he would just throw them to the servants for a new one. Today, he received an ordinary robe that was not worth much, but Alexander was very excited. After Helen left, he hugged the robe on the bed and let his imagination run wild. He did not sleep well the whole night. Without further ado, the three continued on their journey. Alexander felt that this was the happiest journey of his life. Helen was the most beautiful, gentle, and understanding girl in the world. She had an indescribable and irresistible charm. She was so cute that she had unknowingly captured the hearts of two men. Alexander was the noble prince of Macedonia, and Madanzo's identity was even more obvious. It was impossible for them to not see any beauty in the world, but this Helen was definitely different. At this time, the two did not know that the girl beside them was actually the Olympian goddess of love and beauty, Aphrodite, who had personally come to the human world. Helen did not lie, because Aphrodite was the patron saint of Cyprus, and she really wanted to go to Macedonia to find a hero. After leaving Olympus, they would reach the border of the Kingdom of Macedonia if they continued north. Olympus currently belonged to the Eurone League and was in a state of war with the Kingdom of Macedonia. The road to the border was sealed. Today, they were not far from the border. Helen took the initiative and said, "There is a military blockade in front of us. They are in a state of war. We cannot go through." Metatro asked with great interest, "Helen, do you have any ideas for the heroine who has been protecting us all the way?" Helen replied, "We'll take a detour through the remote mountains, avoid the checkpoint, and directly enter Macedonia. I heard that there are monsters in the mountains, but you don't have to be afraid. I will protect you." Alexander and Madanzo looked at each other and nodded at the same time. "Good idea. Thank you so much. Otherwise, we would not know what to do." The three of them left the main road and entered the mountainous area. They walked on a rugged and winding path and headed into the dense forest where few people tread. Accompanying such a girl on an adventure was a joy in life. Anyway, it did not delay their journey. Alexander and Madanzo were also happy to do so. The mountains in this area were connected to a large mountain range in the eastern part of Macedonia that went deep into the Kingdom of Turkey. It was said that there would occasionally be monsters, but it was not far from the edge of the mountain range. There were no overly fierce beasts. A level 5 swordsman would be able to deal with them. The two men also wanted to see Helen's heroic posture when she drew her sword and fought the beasts. It must be more moving than the most beautiful song and dance in the world. They even hoped that a monster would really appear. What they wanted really came true. At noon, the three of them fetched water from a stream in the mountains and started a fire for a picnic. Alexander did not know how to cook, and Madanzo enjoyed watching Helen cook with her delicate hands. At this moment, a deep roar suddenly came from the forest. Even the ground under their feet trembled slightly. Helen jumped up, threw down the food in her hand, grabbed her bag, and pulled out her dagger. She said in a low voice, "Stay by the fire and don't leave. If there are monsters, I will deal with them." After saying this, she brandished her dagger and rushed into the forest. The dagger glowed and slashed forward. The sound of metal colliding could be heard as Helen's dagger slashed into a sharp horn that stretched out from the bushes. The sharp horn swung upwards with all its might, and a huge force sent Helen flying. The dagger also flew out of her hand. Helen tried her best to control her body in the air and landed next to the stream. She could not stand steadily and fell backwards, but a pair of arms caught her firmly. She fell into Alexander's embrace. The monster in the forest was obviously angered by Helen's attack. Trees as thick as the mouth of a bull were uprooted and sent flying in all directions. It roared and wanted to rush over. However, Madanzo had already pulled out the key of destiny and rushed over. The golden light flashed and forced it back step by step. Chapter 326. Not only were the Roth beasts powerful, but adult Roth beasts often had a life-changing skill. Their roars could shock people's souls and cause them to fall into a trance. Even ordinary supreme warriors wouldn't dare to fight them head-on, let alone a 5th-level warrior like Helen who didn't have much combat experience. Fortunately, Madanzo stopped the monster's attack in time. The roar was heard, and Alessandra felt his whole body go limp. He almost lost consciousness. Madanzo's key of destiny shrouded the wrath beast with golden light in time, isolating the soul shock. Alessandra came back to his senses and found Helen trembling in his arms. He quickly patted her back and said, "Don't be afraid, it's okay." Helen also felt that the soul shock had disappeared. She raised her head from Alessandra's chest, and her lips were slightly pale. She couldn't help but turn her head to look at the battle situation over there, and then she exclaimed, "Oh my God, you guys are such powerful warriors." Madanzo waved the golden spear in an extremely majestic and dazzling manner, forcing the huge wrath beast to retreat again and again. It wanted to escape, but it had nowhere to go. Suddenly, trees were broken, and sand and stones flew everywhere, but the flying sand and stones couldn't reach outside the golden light. Although this wrath beast was powerful, it was easy for Madanzo to deal with it, but this oracle deliberately made the scene so intense. He liked to show off when he had nothing to do. At this time, in front of the little prince and Helen, how could he miss the opportunity to show off? The wrath beast was unlucky to be sent to the door to cooperate with Madanzo to display all kinds of gorgeous means. The golden light of the key of destiny diffused, making Madanzo look as majestic as a god in the fierce battle. Alessandra told Helen the truth regretfully, "I'm not sure. Madanzo is protecting me when I travel." "You don't have to worry, Madanzo is very capable, and the small monster is no match for him at all." Seeing how majestic and heroic Madanzo was, Alessandra was also very envious, but he soon had another feeling. Although Helen had turned her head to look at the fierce battle over there, her hands were still hugging his waist without loosening. Alessandra's heartbeat was especially fast with her alluring fragrance in his arms. Was it Madanzo, who fought fiercely against monsters, or was it Alexander, who had a beauty in his arms, who was more comfortable? No one could say for sure. Madanzo, who was in the middle of the fierce battle, didn't forget to turn around to take a look. He discovered that Helen was hiding in Alexander's arms, but she was staring at him with her beautiful eyes. He realized that this scene might have scared the girl. Hence, he no longer pestered the wrath beast. With a soft yell, a golden light transformed into a rope and bound the wrath beast. Then, a golden divine rune was imprinted on the wrath beast's huge head and disappeared. This monster that was charging left and right immediately became obedient. Madanzo took out a translucent yellow rope out of nowhere and tied it around the nose of the wrath beast. Then, he led it out of the messy jungle. The ferocious wrath beast was now as obedient as a pet dog. Alessandra reluctantly let go of Helen and asked with concern, "Are you hurt?" Madanzo shook his head and said, "It's just a wrath beast. How can it hurt me?" Helen, however, was very worried. She walked over and sized Metatro up from head to toe. She reached out and pinched his arm to make sure that he wasn't injured. Then, she held her chest and exclaimed in admiration, "You're really an extraordinary hero. You're even more powerful than those heroes in the legends. I want to apologize to you. I was the one who suggested this path into Macedonia. I even said that I could protect you. If you were really just scholars, I'm afraid I would have harmed you." Fortunately, Alessandra interrupted her and said, "How can you be blamed for this? The appearance of an adult wrath beast here was an accident among accidents. Do you still remember the story of the Macedonian diplomatic mission?" Madanzo was one of the two heroes who rescued the diplomatic mission. However, he was very humble and kept a low profile, so he didn't say his name. Madanzo was humble and kept a low profile. The sun really rose from the west. It was the first time he received such an evaluation. He and Alessandra were traveling incognito in the city-state that belonged to the Euron Alliance. Naturally, they wouldn't expose their identities. This was also a way to keep a low profile. Helen looked at Madanzo with admiration and said, "You're actually so amazing." Madanzo waved his hand and said very humbly, "It's nothing. You don't have to praise me. Miss Helen, I'm very sorry for scaring you just now. I'll let this wroth beast apologize to you. The mountain road is hard to walk on, so let this wroth beast carry you into Macedonia. 2 days later, the three of them walked out of the deep mountains and appeared on the plains in Macedonia. 2 handsome men brought such a beautiful girl with them. The girl didn't ride a horse or a carriage. She was actually riding a wroth beast. Although Madanzo didn't say a word while riding the wroth beast, he still looked majestic. It was impossible for him to keep a low profile even if he wanted to. The appearance of these people soon alerted the local garrison and local officials. A patrolling army quickly came over. Helen saw them from afar and said worriedly, "How should we explain if we are questioned by the patrolling army?" Alessandra smiled and said, "You don't have to explain anything. Just sit properly." As soon as the soldiers who rushed over saw the three of them, they heard an order from the leading officer. Everyone got off their horses and knelt down to salute. Helen only knew that Alessandra was the Prince of Macedonia after the officer saluted and greeted. She quickly jumped off the wroth beast and bowed to Alessandra. "Your Highness, please forgive me. I didn't know your identity. I've been impolite along the way." Alessandra helped her up and said, "Miss, I'm traveling incognito." "You didn't do anything impolite. On the contrary, this is the happiest journey of my life. I really don't know how to thank you. Now that you know my identity, I hope you can still be as restrained as before. Hurry up and get on the wroth beast. Let's continue our journey." Since he had been recognized and brought along such an eye-catching beauty and beast, of course, Alessandra couldn't travel incognito anymore. He returned to the capital under the reception of various officials and the escort of the local garrison. There were 2 things that the people of Macedonia were talking about the most recently. One was that King Philip II had returned victorious and held a grand celebration ceremony. He led the people to offer sacrifices to Zeus and thank the gods for their blessings on Macedonia. The other was that Prince Alessandro returned incognito. He actually led a fierce wroth beast and brought back the most beautiful girl in the world. This also became a symbol of the gods' blessing to Macedonia. Helen could have stayed in the palace or in a post house when she came to Macedonia, but she said, "I have savings and skills. Not only can I protect myself, but I can also support myself. I'll rent a courtyard in the city of Macedonia." Alessandra didn't force her. With his help, Helen rented a good courtyard as soon as she entered the city. Alessandra also sent maids and servants to take care of her daily life. This time, Helen didn't refuse His Highness's kindness. In the following days, Madanzo still often traveled with Alessandra. When they had nothing to do, they always liked to go to Helen's place. After Philip II returned, he reorganized and trained the new army and handled various military and political affairs. Alessandra was his most important assistant, so he was also very busy and didn't have much free time. Therefore, Madanzo spent more and more time looking for Helen alone. There was a period of time when he stayed there almost every day. He had nothing else to do but to listen to Helen talk and watch her every frown and smile. The only thing he didn't want was to stay in her house. As for the wroth beast that Madanzo had caught, Alessandra specially ordered the construction of a strong and comfortable cage to keep it. It wasn't easy to capture such a powerful monster alive. Alessandra had a bold and bizarre idea. He wanted to try to tame this monster so that it could play a greater role in battle. But the wroth beast was almost impossible to tame. It was only willing to carry Helen on its back because it was bound by Madanzo's powerful strength. Seeing that it was difficult to succeed, Alessandra found another way. He invited various supreme mages in the kingdom who were good at summoning magic in an attempt to establish a soul contract with this powerful monster, but they also didn't succeed. So Alessandra begged Madanzo again. Madanzo was itching to show off in front of Helen, so he took Helen with him to tame the wroth beast. But he tried to use summoning magic in an attempt to establish a soul contract, but he still didn't succeed. Among Amon's disciples, Cilia was the most proficient in summoning magic, and Madanzo wasn't good at it. After losing face in front of Helen once, Madanzo wasn't discouraged. He begged Amon again. Of course, Amon already knew what happened, but he didn't ask about it. He only acted when Madanzo came to beg. The result was surprising. Even Amon failed and didn't succeed in establishing a soul contract with the Wrath beast. After that, Madanzo asked Amon privately, even with your means, you can't tame that Wrath beast? I've fought it before. It's not very powerful, only equivalent to an 8th level warrior. Amon explained, using summoning magic to establish a soul contract, whether it's coercion, temptation, guidance, or persuasion, the monster has to be willing. Otherwise, even if you kill it, you won't succeed in establishing a soul contract. Madanzo was even more puzzled. A Wrath beast in a cage has no reason to refuse a powerful god like you. You don't even need to coerce it. Don't forget that you're also a master of necromancy, you should know of a way to make it make a decision voluntarily. Amon shook his head, I don't have any way, tell Alisanda not to try anymore, no one will find a way. Madanzo was stunned, how can this be? Amon explained unhurriedly, there's a special characteristic of summoning magic, the soul contract is exclusive. If a spirit beast has already established a soul contract with a master, as long as the contract is still there, no matter how powerful others are, they can't establish the same contract with it. Madanzo was taken aback, you mean that it's actually a summoned beast under someone's control? But so many supreme mages who are good at summoning magic didn't notice it. Amon nodded and said, yes, the method is very ingenious, the summoning magic of the Olympian gods is indeed extraordinary. Otherwise they wouldn't have allowed you to bring this Wrath beast back to the capital. To be honest, even I didn't notice it, it was only after trying all kinds of methods and failing that I came to this conclusion. Madanzo frowned, if it's a summoned beast, then its appearance is not a coincidence. Amon looked at Madanzo with a faint smile, and said meaningfully, Beauty and the Beast, it's not a coincidence. Madanzo, don't tell me you haven't noticed the problem by now. Madanzo shrunk his head, but smiled without saying anything. Aphrodite came to the human world under the name of Helen, and lived in the city of Macedonia as an ordinary woman. Even if she was clever enough to hide from Madanzo, she probably couldn't hide from Amon's eyes. But she didn't show any malice, and everything she did was so natural, and she didn't act as a god. As a foreign god in the realm of Olympus, Amon naturally couldn't interfere. For a beautiful girl like her who was alone, she would attract many suitors no matter where she went. Even the nobles would come to her house to express their admiration or ask for her affection. But there was no such situation in Macedonia, and no one even dared to harass Helen. At that time, it was because of Alexander, who dared to offend the heir of the kingdom. So, Madanzo became the only harasser. One day, Helen took her maid to the temple of Zeus to pray. She murmured to the statue of Zeus, my father, I came to Macedonia to find the hero in my heart, and I long to conquer and be conquered. But now I don't know what to do, because at the same time, there are 2 outstanding heroes that have moved my heart. It was not known whether Zeus heard these words, but anyway, the priest on duty in the temple heard it, and the news soon reached the ears of Alexander in the palace. It was on this day that Amon suddenly found Aristotle and said, Sir, I hope you can do me a favor. I want to see His Majesty the King. It had been almost 2 years since Amon came to Macedonia, and it was the first time that he had taken the initiative to see Philip II. Aristotle immediately went to the palace to report. Although Philip II was busy, he immediately made arrangements and summoned Amon alone that night. He wanted Amon to have dinner, a private dinner with only the 2 of them. It was not known what this god talked about with His Majesty the King at the private dinner, but anyway, it was not too long, and no one else, including the gods, could hear it. After dinner, Amon left the banquet hall, but he did not leave immediately. Instead, he stayed alone in a small hall next door, while Philip II ordered someone to call Alexander in. Chapter 327. Alexander was stunned. He lowered his head and whispered, Father, why would you care about such a trivial matter? Philip II replied, If it were someone else, it would indeed be a trivial matter, and I wouldn't want to get involved. But have you really never doubted why the girl appeared, and why she wanted to win the favor of you and Madanzo at the same time? You should know who Madanzo is, and you should know who Amon is. Do you still remember the oracle 2 years ago? The people mentioned by the great father of the gods, Zeus, should be Amon and Madanzo. Alexander still lowered his head and said, "Of course I know what the arrival of Mr. Amon and Madanzo means to the kingdom of Macedonia. Please rest assured, father, no matter what, I will not offend Madanzo and Amon because of Helen." Philip II said again, "It doesn't just depend on whether you are willing or not. If someone has the intention to provoke a dispute, there will definitely be a rift. Since you have this attitude, you might as well express it and bless Madanzo and Helen as a friend. Helen has no reason to refuse such blessings." Alexander did not speak, but just frowned slightly. Philip II stood up, walked over, and patted him on the shoulder. "My child, what is your real vow? Is it the future kingdom of Macedonia, or is it a beautiful girl, Helen? It seems that the two do not contradict each other, and a powerful king can naturally have the most beautiful girl in the world. But now there is a contradiction, and it is not necessary. You still have a long way to go, and there are many trials to go through. You will face many such choices." As they spoke, Amon sat next to them and listened quietly. He quietly performed a kind of magic, the guardian of Isis. This was a kind of blessing magic, which could make people forget pain and fatigue, and make their souls more awake and at ease. The purpose of this was not only to appease Alexander, but the most important function of the blessing magic was to eliminate all kinds of negative influences on the soul. As the goddess of love and beauty of the Olympian pantheon, Aphrodite must be proficient in the art of seduction. It was a divine spell that could affect the senses of the soul and had the effect of charm. It was similar to the summoning divine spell that established a soul. Amon had already seen through her tricks on the wroth beast, so he naturally would not let his guard down. If Alexander's soul was affected by the effect of the divine charm, it would not be easy for Philip II to persuade him. Amon did not see such a trace in Alisanda's soul, but he still used the guardian of Isis to pray for Alisanda. Regardless of whether Alisanda noticed it or not, he tried his best to eliminate this possibility. Under his father's persuasion, Alisanda still made a decision. He knew that Madanzo liked Helen, and that Helen attracted the affection of 2 men at the same time. It seemed like she wouldn't reject anyone. Thus, Alisanda decided to find an opportunity to express his feelings and bless Helen and Madanzo. The next day, Amon took the wroth beast away. Without saying anything, he released the monster back into the mountains. Alisanda went to visit Helen, and it just so happened that Madanzo was there. While talking and laughing, the young prince suddenly said to Helen, "You came to Macedonia to find the hero in your heart. In fact, the hero is right in front of you. Is there anyone here who is braver than Madanzo? You two have quite a good impression of each other. If you can get together, I will send the most sincere blessing on behalf of the kingdom of Macedonia." This sentence almost made Madanzo blush, but Helen looked very surprised. She turned around and went into the house with a shy look, as if she didn't know how to answer. Alisanda chatted with Madanzo for a while, and even made a few jokes about him and Helen before he got up and left. That night, Helen sat alone under the lamp and said to herself again, "Actually, I prefer the handsome Prince Alisanda. A powerful warrior is just a personal strength, but a king who conquers many states is the real hero." Although she spoke in a low voice, her maid heard it. The maid was sent by Alisanda, and this sentence naturally reached Alisanda's ears. However, Alisanda didn't respond and pretended that he didn't know at all. He gradually reduced his contact with Helen. Even if he visited Helen occasionally, it was with Madanzo. And Madanzo took advantage of the situation and met Helen more frequently. Finally, one day, he spent the night at Helen's house. The next morning, when the energetic and radiant Madanzo came back while humming a little tune, he happened to run into Amon sitting in the courtyard. Aristotle's mansion wasn't small, and there was a courtyard specially empty for Amon and Madanzo. Usually, no one would disturb them. Amon put a few chairs in the courtyard and sat in the middle. Seeing this, Madanzo was stunned. Seeing that there was no one around, he asked awkwardly, "My God, were you waiting for me?" Amon looked up at him and said without batting an eyelid, "Desire is one of the forces that move this world. It's just a matter of how we face it. To awaken the power of the origin, the first test is to face desire, and this test will continue from beginning to end." He obviously meant something. Metatro chuckled and said nothing. Amon asked again, "How did it feel last night?" Madanzo was a little embarrassed and whispered, "I've never felt so happy before." Amon's tone sank slightly, "Do you really think it was her?" What did that mean? His voice carried a message. In fact, last night, the girl named Helen wasn't in her room at all, and Madanzo didn't spend the night with anyone. As the goddess of love and beauty, Aphrodite had many unique and clever methods. For example, her summoning magic was something that even Amon didn't notice. Last night, she used an illusion that could charm the soul, making Madanzo think that he was having sex with Helen. This method was very clever, and even Amon couldn't help but admire it. Madanzo didn't use any means to resist, and he experienced unprecedented pleasure. If Aphrodite used this method to seduce men in the world, almost no one could resist. Amon questioned Madanzo, not because he was blaming him for spending the night, but because he understood. Madanzo lowered his head and replied, "I know. My God, do you want to blame me? I didn't lose anything, and on the contrary, I'm quite grateful to her." Amon seemed to want to laugh, but he held it back and said with a straight face, "You really enjoyed it, and now you're waiting to be beaten." Madanzo took a step back and said in surprise, "Who will beat me?" Amon, "Me." Madanzo, "You? Why?" Amon said in a low voice, "You'll know in a while. Someone will come to settle the score for this night. You should know who Helen is, so why did you interfere?" Madanzo quietly took another step back and replied in a low voice, "The reason is that Helen is really cute, the most charming woman I've ever seen. She also took the initiative to express her affection to me, so I have no reason to refuse." Amon asked, "If she is Helen, it's nothing. You don't have to say this reason, what else?" Madanzo finally raised his head, blinked his eyes and replied, "If Alexander is infatuated with Helen, he will listen to whatever she says. This may not be a bad thing for the kingdom of Macedonia, as the future heir has the love of the goddess, but it is not a good thing for you. I'm afraid she wants to use Alexander to force you away. Your cooperation with Zeus ended with you leaving without reason, and your attempt to find evidence failed." Amon smiled bitterly, "A fool who thinks he's smart. Is this the reason?" Madanzo replied very honestly, "Of course not only that, there is also the first reason, which I've just answered." Amon suddenly sighed, "People who want to find trouble will find trouble no matter what, and not everyone is a fool. I know in my heart that she is already at my door." As soon as he finished speaking, a servant outside the courtyard shouted, "Mr. Amon, Miss Helen and His Royal Highness Prince Alexander are looking for you." Amon said loudly, "Please come in, the seats are ready." Madanzo then realized that no wonder Amon would put 6 chairs in the courtyard. Helen came, and her eyes were still red. Alexander also came, and he looked a little embarrassed. It seemed that he was called by Helen. Aristotle also came in with the two of them. Amon was not a rude person, but he was not pretentious either. When he saw them come in, he did not stand up to welcome them, but deliberately waved to Aristotle and said, "Sir, please take a seat." As for whether the others sat or not, Amon did not care. Anyway, the seats were there, and he could do as he pleased. Madanzo did not sit down, but stood in the same place with his head down. Alexander and Helen did not sit down either. Helen took a step forward and bowed to Amon with a wronged expression, "Mr. Amon, I heard that His Royal Highness Alexander respects you very much, and Madanzo is also your disciple, so I would like to ask you to uphold justice today." Amon gently waved his hand, "Beautiful girl, please don't be sad, just say what you have to say." Helen lowered her head, and pulled on Alexander's sleeve. Alexander coughed lightly, and looked at Aristotle with a pleading gaze. It seemed that this matter was not something that they could speak of, so they asked Aristotle for help. Aristotle's expression was a little helpless, and he said with slight embarrassment, "It's like this, Mr. Madanzo forcibly stayed in Miss Helen's room that night. I won't go into the details, but the servants and maids can testify. Madanzo is a hero, and Miss Helen could not resist his strength, but..." Before he finished speaking, a "pa" sound was heard. Aman waved his hand, and a translucent long whip flew out from his sleeve. This was the whip that Enril used to shepherd sheep, and Aman's horsewhip. It made a beautiful and exaggerated arc in the air, and the tip of the whip ruthlessly struck Madanzo's back. The whip was as sharp as a knife, and Madanzo's clothes were cut open like paper. This was not a light blow. Alexander hurriedly rushed forward to stop it, and shouted, "Mr. Aman, please calm down, please don't do this." Madanzo let out a short cry of pain, and Helen also stepped forward with open arms. "Mr. Aman, please don't punish him like this." Aman conveniently kept the whip, and said with an angry expression, "I beat him, does it hurt your heart? What a kind-hearted girl. Madanzo must pay the price for his actions, this is the result of his choice." Aphrodite secretly cursed Aman in her heart, but on the surface, she said sweetly, "Please listen to Mr. Aristotle's words first, it won't be too late to be angry." Aman turned to Aristotle and said, "Sir, you haven't finished speaking?" Aristotle had to continue to explain, "The kind girl Helen thinks that she is also responsible, and does not want to accuse Madanzo. She only came to ask you and me to uphold justice." Aman asked again, "Then how do you think Madanzo should be punished?" Aristotle thought for a moment. "Madanzo is a noble warrior. If Miss Helen does not object, according to the custom of the city of Macedonia, we can call the representatives of the citizens to carry out a potsherd vote to decide whether or not he should be listed as an unwelcome person and banished from the city." The so-called potsherd vote meant that when a meeting was held, each person would have a potsherd drawn on it to express support or agreement, and then vote by secret ballot. This practice was first carried out in the city of Yaren, and later spread to various places in Heaton. Madanzo forcibly stayed in Helen's room at night, and Helen was a guest of Prince Alexander. Madanzo's action was also disrespectful to the Kingdom of Macedonia. What Aristotle said was the usual way to punish a noble. The punishment was not very heavy, but if Madanzo was banished in this way, and Madanzo was brought here by Aman, then it would not be good for Aman to stay. Aman said bitterly, "He is not welcome anywhere. I hope he disappears from the world as soon as possible." "Madanzo, let me ask you, did you open the door or did she open the door?" "Madanzo, I opened the door." "Aman, did you take the initiative or did she take the initiative?" "Madanzo, I also took the initiative." "Aman, did she say she was unwilling?" "Madanzo, she said no a few times, but she did not say she was unwilling." "Aman, no buts." "Who was the one who closed the door?" "Madanzo, she was the one who closed the door." Aman then said to Aristotle, "In this case, I have another suggestion to punish Madanzo. I wonder if it is okay." Aristotle hurriedly said, "I just said one of the common punishments. If Mr. Aman has any suggestions, please say it." Aman thought for a moment and said, "No matter how we punish Madanzo, we have to be fair to Miss Helen. Who can judge that our punishment is fair?" Helen finally couldn't help but say, "I invited someone. Her judgment will definitely be fair." In the presence of Aman and Aristotle, it was rather surprising that Helen had invited someone to judge the case. At this time, everyone in the courtyard couldn't help but look at the door because a person had walked in. It was as if he had suddenly appeared from the void and stepped through the door. Chapter 328. "It's you?" Aman asked in a deep voice. "It's me," the woman replied faintly. From her appearance, one could guess that she was a deity, and from the way she closed her eyes, Aman guessed that she was the Olympian goddess of justice and fairness, Themis. But this was not enough to surprise Aman, and he even lost his composure. This goddess was very beautiful, and although she was not as charming as Helen, she was gorgeous and dignified. Ammon actually recognized her. He had seen her in the mortal world a long time ago. The Olympian goddess of justice and fairness, Themis, was not one of the 12 main gods of today. But Themis's status was not lower than that of Apollo, Athena, Aphrodite, and the others. In the myths and legends, she was the second wife of Zeus, the father of the gods, besides Hera. In the myths and legends of the mortal world, Themis's seat among the gods in heaven was right next to Zeus, and she was the judge of the differences between the gods. The myths of the mortal world were, of course, not quite the same as the actual situation in heaven, and people only deconstructed and interpreted it in a way that they could understand. But it was precisely because of such myths that some things that happened in the past might not make Zeus happy, but he could not say anything about Ammon. In fact, Themis's status was because of her identity. Zeus defeated the original god Unos and created his own Olympian heaven by means of fusion, and most of the gods of Olympus were still there. Themis was the representative of the ancient gods before the War of the Gods. These gods were neutral in the War of the Gods and still possessed great power. Zeus achieved the so-called God of the Gods achievement, and the ancient goddess of justice and fairness, Themis, also hoped to seek higher achievements. She once went to the mortal world in the form of a new soul, and as a mortal in a foreign divine realm, she gained new knowledge. At that time, she was born on the outskirts of Montefiore, Igut, the daughter of a farmer, and her name was Themis. The first time Ammon met her was in a luxurious brothel in Montefiore. At that time, Miss Phi's beauty had spread far and wide, and she was known as the flower of Montefiore. She became a prostitute because she wanted to avenge her father who had died unjustly. At that time, as a general, Ammon made use of this matter to wreak havoc in Montefiore and avenge Miss Phi. He then ransomed her out of the brothel and took her away. Later, Miss Phi and Ammon's disciple, John, became a couple and also received the guidance of the Origin power. Later, in the battle against the Assyrian Empire's giant legion, John unfortunately died. Even though Miss Phi knew that she could not save John, she still charged into the enemy's formation and died on the battlefield. When Miss Phi died, Ammon was not present. Instead, he was recuperating in eternity. At that time, he had just become a god. If Ammon was present, he might or might not have discovered anything, because at that time, his realm was actually very far from Miss Phi's. But if Ammon was in Olympus at that time, he would have clearly learned that the goddess of justice and fairness, Themis, had returned to heaven after a period of cultivation in the mortal world. Miss Phi and Themis, the pronunciation of their names only differed by one syllable, which could be considered a mysterious coincidence. When Ammon saw this god with his own eyes, he triggered the imprint in his soul and recognized her. He was very surprised and also a little excited. He then asked in a deep voice, "Since it's you, why don't you open your eyes and look at me?" Her eyes were still closed, and she replied calmly, "Closing my eyes does not mean that I'm blind, I just don't want to see the face and identity of the contender. I won't waver because of selfishness, I won't be tempted, and I won't succumb to force. This has always been the case when I'm the arbiter." The external appearance of a god was her internal state of mind. Since Themis had already expressed her stance, Helen invited her to be the arbiter, and she did not ask who the contender was. Ammon nodded and said, "I believe that your judgment will definitely be fair, then please listen to my suggestion on how to punish Medanzo." Themis said expressionlessly, "Speak." Ammon pointed at Medanzo and Helen, and said to Themis, "Since the arbiter is you, I don't need to explain what happened. I just want to ask Miss Helen, in what capacity did she come to ask me and Aristotle to give her justice?" Themis said to Helen, "Young lady, please answer for yourself." Helen replied, "I, who is standing here, am an ordinary woman who came from afar to Macedonia, and I also accepted the invitation of Prince Alexander." Ammon gently stroked the back of his hand and said, "That's easy. As far as I know, His Royal Highness has blessed you and Medanzo. Of course, you can accept or not accept this blessing, this is just His Royal Highness' attitude. You have also told Medanzo that he is your hero, and Medanzo has also told me that a girl like Helen is like his dream lover. So now, my punishment for Medanzo is to let him officially marry you." Medanzo's legs went soft, and he almost fell to the ground. If Helen was Helen, of course, there was no problem with Amon's suggestion, and Medanzo would not be unwilling. But now that he knew that Helen was up to no good and wanted to drive a wedge between Amon and the kingdom of Macedonia, and her identity was the goddess of love and beauty of the Olympian divine system, if Medanzo still wanted to marry her, it would be a bit like courting death. Aristotle, who was at the side, had a strange expression on his face. The honest elder wanted to laugh, but he tried his best to hold it in. He nodded and said, "Yes. How can we always think of things in a bad light? As long as Miss Helen is willing, this is the best ending." Medanzo quickly interrupted, "Sir, Atling shouted, you? Now is the time to judge how to punish you, listen to me honestly." Helen interrupted again, "Of course this is a good suggestion, but," Amon waved his hand and interrupted her again, "Miss Helen, don't worry, I haven't finished my words. My suggestion will definitely be very fair to you. Medanzo is a noble warrior, and his identity is also recognized in the kingdom of Macedonia. If he officially marries you, I will ask King Philip II to grant you a noble identity and a title." Alessandra quickly nodded and said, No problem, leave it to me." The young prince was very intelligent. When he saw Themis enter the courtyard in that manner, he vaguely guessed the identity of Helen and Themis. Helen once said that she came from the city of Cyprus, and that Aphrodite was the patron goddess of Cyprus. Such a beautiful girl was most likely the goddess of love and beauty herself. Themis suddenly appeared out of thin air and stepped into the courtyard. She should be a god, and there was an 80% to 90% chance that she was the legendary goddess of fairness and justice. Helen being able to invite this goddess as an arbitrator was equivalent to exposing her own identity. Alessandra realized that this was a dispute between deities, so he stood at the side and did not even breathe heavily. Only now did he carefully interrupt. Aphrodite also did not expect Amon to make such a decision and sell out his follower. He really had the guts to let his oracle marry the goddess of love and beauty of the Olympian pantheon. Was he not afraid of offending the entire Olympian pantheon? Although there was nothing wrong with the suggestion, Aphrodite did not expect Amon to make it. Helen blinked and said, "Thank you, Mr. Amon, thank you, Your Highness. I came to Macedonia to find my hero, and I am also responsible for what happened yesterday. I am willing to marry Medanzo. But if Medanzo marries me, he will stay in Macedonia forever, become a subject of Macedonia, and have the faith of this place." She was deliberately making things difficult for Medanzo. If he married Helen, he would have to be a Hiltonian, and he would have to believe in the Hiltonian god. Amon smiled and shook his head. "Kind girl, you are wrong. Medanzo is a warrior of Babylon, a general of Igut, a hero of Cologne, and an honored guest of Macedonia. Regardless of the customs or laws of any place, marrying a wife is marrying a wife. Once you marry him, you will have to serve him as his wife. You will have to manage the household and bear children for him. Without your husband's permission, you are not allowed to leave the city. Because you have just answered my question, you are afraid that his identity is not someone else, but Miss Helen. Mr. Aristotle, you are the most knowledgeable scholar here, am I right?" Aristotle smiled. "The customs and laws of any country are like this, and Macedonia is no exception. This is the common custom of the human world. But Mr. Amon, you have not finished speaking, please continue. Medanzo is your disciple, and you are now making a decision as a judge of justice. You still need to express your stance." Amon nodded. "Yes, if Helen decides to marry Medanzo, she will have to follow her husband's faith and respect her husband's elders. I will also treat her fairly and treat her as my disciple. Arbiter with his eyes closed, please make a decision. Is this decision fair?" Helen waved her hand. "Wait." Amon frowned slightly. "Don't tell me you want to object." Helen, "Yes, I object. You should ask for my permission." Amon smiled. "Yes, we should ask for your permission. We can't force your family to marry Medanzo. This is just a suggestion to resolve this matter and let the arbiter you invited decide whether it is fair or not. If you refuse, it is because of your kindness that you will no longer hold Madanzo responsible. As for the cause and effect of the matter, I think you and the arbiter are well aware of it. At this time, Themis suddenly opened her eyes. Madanzo, who had been secretly looking at her, asked in surprise, "Our arbiter, why did you open your eyes?" Themis replied, "When I open my eyes, it means that there is no need to make a ruling. Amon's suggestion is fair, but it puts me in a dilemma, so I have to open my eyes. Helen and Madanzo are unmarried, but they have a good impression of each other. Whether the good impression is real or fake, there is no flaw on the surface. Metatro stayed overnight in Helen's room, but he didn't barge in. Helen's previous actions indicated that she had accepted this hero. If it was a mortal, Amon would let Madanzo officially marry Helen and ask the Kingdom of Macedonia to grant Helen noble status. It would be fair no matter who made the ruling. Helen could agree and have the right to refuse. In fact, Helen had already agreed just now, but she took the opportunity to make things difficult for Amon. But Amon was ruthless enough. He directly followed the customs of the human world and treated Helen like a disciple. If Helen was Helen, there was no problem with Amon's conditions. But what about Aphrodite? Did she have to leave the Olympian system and join the kingdom of angels? She only had one choice, and that was to quickly disappear from the human world. Why didn't Themis want to make a ruling? Amon's suggestion was fair in the human world, but it was not fair to Madanzo because Helen was a god and could disappear and return to Olympus at any time. Helen turned around and asked, "Themis, are you not going to make a ruling anymore?" Themis also said directly, "Aphrodite, this is a farce. You think you are smart, but you are actually stupid. It is unfair for you to play tricks on Madanzo as a god. Last night, Helen, as a mortal, did not exist. Go, leave this place. This is the suggestion I made when I opened my eyes." The two goddesses called each other's names and exposed their identities. Alexander quickly knelt down, and Aristotle also stood up and bowed. Madanzo had a strange expression. It was unknown whether he wanted to cry or laugh. Amon stood where he was without moving, just watching quietly. Aphrodite glared at Themis but did not say anything. She stomped her foot and disappeared. Themis also did not say anything. She turned around and walked out of the courtyard, just like how she came. Amon shouted behind her, "It is not easy for us to meet, and I finally recognize you. Don't you want to chat a little longer?" Themis stopped and did not turn around. She only replied indifferently, "Amon, the flower of Montefiore is not clear about her origins. That is just a part of my training experience. I should thank you, but everything is over now that she is dead. Themis has already used her life to repay me. I just want to remind you of one thing. Do you still remember him? Have you looked for him?" Amon sighed. "John. I once swore in front of the graves of John and Themis that if their souls are reborn in the human world, I will continue to guide them. Now it seems that Themis's soul has not been reborn in the human world. As for John, I am sorry to say that I have not found that person yet." Themis sneered. "Not yet? Are you afraid that Q has forgotten about him? Have you looked for him? I am here today to tell you, I will find that person and give him another kind of guidance. This is also the vow I made when I first returned to the Olympian kingdom." Amon wanted to say something else, but he hesitated. From what Themis said, she wanted to guide the reborn soul of John into the Olympian kingdom. This vow was completely understandable. However, Amon had also made the same vow in front of John's grave, so it seemed that this would conflict with her. There was a hint of blame in Themis's tone towards Amon. Because of all the disciples in the Garden of Eden, only John had died accidentally. When the gods guided the messengers in the human world, it also required the guided person to be willing. If the reborn soul was more willing to accept Themis's guidance, Amon could not interfere. But if she did so, Zeus might not be happy. After all, in the legends, Themis was Zeus's second wife. Thinking about it carefully, Themis's tone actually implied that she wanted to fight with Ammon or Zeus. She also wanted to seek a higher realm, and guiding the reborn soul contained this intention, or rather, a method. Ammon thought of so many things in a flash, but Themis had already walked out of the courtyard and disappeared. Ammon looked at the place where Themis disappeared, lost in thought. Medanzo, Alexander, Aristotle, and the others walked out of the courtyard. He did not greet them, only thinking about a question in his heart. In the life of Themis, the flower of Montefiore, what did Themis seek to prove? Themis was not the incarnation of Themis, but the god herself, who became an ordinary living being through the rebirth of a soul. Ammon did not do such a thing, but Artemis and Anu had done it, becoming Shwe Ding and Goliath respectively. Anu wanted to prove that he had surpassed the realm of the god of creation, and if he failed, Anu did not break through to a higher realm, but at least he understood that he was on the wrong path. Artemis's search was successful. She wanted to prove that she had reached the realm of the creator, and after Shwe Ding disappeared, Artemis, who returned to heaven, had the achievements of the creator. Shwe Ding was once trapped in the body of a cat for several years, unable to break free, and in the end, it was Ammon who helped her. As for Themis's situation, it was completely different. The goddess of fairness and justice had long reached the pinnacle of the creator. Before the battle of the gods in the Olympus pantheon, her temple had the power to issue the oracle of Delphi. Later, Zeus merged with the Olympus pantheon, and Themis also wanted to seek a higher realm. As Themis, coming to the human world was part of her training experience, but it was difficult to say whether this experience was a success or a failure. After Themis died, the goddess of fairness and justice returned to the Olympus pantheon. She did not break through to a higher realm, but her experience in the human world was not without gains. Whether it was for gods or mortals, a valuable experience was a kind of wealth in itself. Themis abandoned the prejudices that the gods had and was reborn as a human with a pure soul. She witnessed everything in the foreign world again, and was fortunate enough to receive another kind of guidance. She was already very lucky. There was an ancient question that the sages often asked in the plaza if luck could be replicated. Would people still be able to achieve the same success if they changed their identity and situation? This question had a different meaning to the gods. For any god to achieve transcendence and eternal life, it was a rare great fortune in the human world, and there were many opportunities that could not be replicated. If the gods abandoned their identity as gods and tried again like mortals, could they achieve the same success? This was a huge question, and the answer was almost impossible. Chapter 329. Even those with high achievements in the mortal world like Goliath did not transcend eternal life again. Those who were both lucky and unfortunate like Batet were only one step away. As for Misfi, she received guidance from Ammon, which was considered a rare blessing in life, but she was still far from transcending eternal life in this life. But this confirmation did not hinder the original achievements of the gods. After this life ended, they would still regain their identity as gods, and they would also have more knowledge. It was precisely during this process that Artemis broke through the achievement of the creator. Suppose there really was a situation where a god came to the mortal world in the form of a new soul and became immortal, and achieved the achievement of transcending eternal life in this life, what would the result be? There would not be another god in the world, and he would still return to the eternal life and restore his original identity. He would be able to integrate all the magic he had obtained in this life, and he would be stronger than before in all aspects. As far as Ammon knew, after Zeus transcended eternal life, he had returned to the mortal world more than once in the form of a new soul. Zeus did not enjoy eternal life in the divine kingdom, but he constantly went through the trials of life, so he left behind too many legends. Zeus came to the mortal world again, and when the mortal's life ended, he returned to the divine kingdom again and again. That was until one time, when Zeus, as a newly born mortal, obtained the achievement of transcending eternal life. It was under this great opportunity that he sought to prove the so-called God of Gods realm. Today, Zeus, Marduk, and Ammon had all achieved similar achievements, but everyone had different opportunities to reach this step. After Zeus achieved such an achievement, he slashed off his incarnation and became King Gabata to resist the invasion of Pots. This was an even more mysterious method, and even Amon had never tried it. As Miss Fi in this life, although she did not break through to a higher level, it was also an important experience and accumulation for this goddess. With Themis's status, she still wanted to go on such an adventure. She obviously hoped to have the same achievements as Zeus or Amon. Perhaps she already had this wish when the War of the Gods broke out, and this became an inexplicable fate between her, Zeus, and Amon. She told Amon that she was also going to search for John's soul to be reborn. She did not simply want to snatch his disciple, but there was another mysterious meaning behind it. Finally understanding the cause and effect, Amon could only smile bitterly. His vow was not to become a god like he was now. Otherwise, he would not have come to the Hetan Peninsula, agreed to cooperate with Zeus, and suffered the hostility and harassment of the Olympian gods. While Amon stood in the yard in a daze, the two gods of Olympus were talking to each other. Apollo said to Yelena, goddess of wisdom, "Is this your idea for the love god?" Themis is right, I don't think this is a brilliant plan, but more like a farce. Yelena asked in return, don't you find it surprising that Aphrodite's method of seducing two men in the human world turned out to be like this? In another situation, those two men would definitely turn against each other. Apollo snorted and said, in another situation? But you should know that Amon is there, and Medanzo and Alexander are not simple characters. Why did Zeus choose Alexander to fulfill his wish, and why did he look for Amon to cooperate? Aphrodite's trip to the human world this time, other than embarrassing the gods, she did not achieve anything else. This is what makes Amon so powerful. You couldn't see it at the time, but you will understand it later. Otherwise, how could I lose to him? Yelena smiled and said, don't worry, this is just the beginning. You lost to him, but it doesn't mean that I will lose to him. This kind of thing is not useless, people's feelings are always accumulating. When Amon brings 1, 2, 3 troubles in a row, conflicts will erupt. At this time, Aphrodite had already returned to Olympus and happened to appear next to Yelena. Hearing this, she immediately asked, Goddess of Wisdom, do you have any follow-up plans? Yelena nodded and said, yes, I still have a plan. Aphrodite, this time, you did not use your best method to make those two men fall in love with you. Maybe they were willing to love you before they discovered your identity, but they did not unknowingly fall in love with you and are willing to make a choice for this love. Aphrodite frowned and said, Yelena, you should know that the question that the love god cannot answer is precisely, what is love? Yelena nodded again and said, yes, I am very clear. Then the former Anunnaki goddess of youth and love, Murin, also cannot answer this question, right? Aphrodite was stunned. What does this have to do with her? Yelena smiled confidently and said, don't ask what it has to do with her first. You should answer why you did not use your best method, whether it was against Alexander or Medanzo, you did not shoot that arrow. Aphrodite frowned and said, didn't you tell me to go to the human world as a girl? Yelena said, yes, you did the right thing, but it was not good enough. Now that Helen is gone, you are still the goddess of love of the Olympian gods. I will tell you what to do. Yelena whispered to Aphrodite again. As for what ideas she came up with, the world and the other gods did not know. After Helen left, Alexander also understood that he had met the god of love and beauty, and he did not think that his words and actions had offended this goddess. Although he already knew the purpose of Aphrodite's visit, the young prince could not help but feel an inexplicable sense of melancholy when he recalled the past. Before Helen left, because he was busy with the affairs of the kingdom, the time he spent with Medanzo had gradually decreased. Often Medanzo went to Helen alone, and after Helen left, the number of times they met was even less. On this day, Alexander accompanied his father back from the outskirts of the barracks, and Philip II suddenly reminded him, my child, recently you have been accompanying me to help me deal with the affairs of the kingdom, it has been a long time since you visited your teacher, right? At present, there are a lot of things that have to be done, so let the officials do what needs to be done. There is nothing else to do during this period of time, so you should go to your teacher more often. When you really have to shoulder the heavy burden in the future, you will not have so much leisure time. Your sister is about to get married, and the Kingdom of Macedonia is preparing for her wedding. I have invited many guests to attend with their beautiful daughters, including the princesses of various states. When the time comes, you can choose your beloved girl from among them. Alexander asked, "My sister's wedding, you have invited the princesses of various kingdoms to attend, is it specially arranged for me?" Philip II replied, "Yes, you are already 20 years old, and as the heir of the kingdom, you must also consider marriage. But I will not force you. Who you choose is up to your liking." After entering the city, Philip II's carriage returned to the palace, while Alexander went directly to Aristotle's mansion. Since the last time the prince went out incognito, he had a habit of walking through the streets and alleys in casual clothes. Ordinary people could not recognize him, but the servants in Aristotle's mansion were very familiar with him, and there was no need for him to announce his arrival. Alexander, accompanied by 3 plainclothed guards, walked to Aristotle's house. Along the way, he was still thinking about what his father had said. He had a sister who was 2 years younger than him, and she would be married in a few months. The person who married the princess was the most important lord of the original Turkic kingdom, and this was a typical political marriage. The Turkic kingdom was located in the northeast of Macedonia, across a strait from the original Hittite kingdom. After the Potsdam Empire destroyed the Hittite kingdom and before attacking Hilton, they annexed the Turkic kingdom and established the Turkic province. Later, the Potsdam army was repelled, and the Turkic province broke away from Potsdam's rule. Part of its territory was seized by Macedonia, and most of the other territories were divided by lords of various sizes, and the original Turkic kingdom was never restored. Through the arrangement of this political marriage, one could also see Philip II's intentions. Sparta had become independent, and only a few city-states of the Eurone League were still resisting stubbornly, and the unification of the Hilton Peninsula was irreversible. Philip II was also preparing a plan to attack the Potsdam Empire, and first of all, he had to integrate the territory of the original Turkic kingdom and try to obtain the support of the most local forces. Alexander's sister had not yet seen her fiancé, but the marriage had been decided, and she had to marry him even if she did not want to. Alexander thought of himself again. His father's attitude towards him was much more tolerant, and he would invite distinguished guests from various states to attend the wedding with their beautiful daughters, allowing Alexander to choose his sweetheart from among these princesses. But did he really have a choice? Could he find his sweetheart just by glancing around the wedding? But with Alexander's status, Philip II had already made the most generous arrangements. What sort of girl would he take a fancy to? Could she be any better than Helen? With these thoughts in mind, he had already arrived in front of Aristotle's house. Alexander stopped and raised his head, just in time to see a girl. His heart seemed to have been shot by an invisible arrow, and he froze there, unable to recover for a long time. The girl wore a pure white cotton dress with indigo stripes. Although it was the color of a commoner's clothing, it perfectly outlined her dainty figure. She stood in the spring breeze, her beautiful hair and dress fluttering gently. Her face was like the bright sunshine, as if it could dissipate all the haze in one's heart, and her eyes were like a clear spring under the starry sky, gentle and mysterious. Perhaps it could not be said that she was more beautiful than Helen, but Alexander's feeling was completely different. When he first saw Helen, he was very amazed, and he exclaimed in his heart that there could be such a charming woman in the world. But at this moment, when he saw this girl, it was as if a long-buried memory that even he did not know was awakened in the depths of his soul. It was an aura of desire. If he saw this girl at his sister's wedding, Alexander would not hesitate to say to his father, "That's her, I want to choose her." Was this love at first sight? Then what was the so-called love? Alexander did not even know her, and he did not know where she came from, whether she was gentle or violent, kind or evil. It was this feeling or reaction that touched his soul, as if it had been branded with an indelible mark, and his entire body and mind resonated with it. What Alexander didn't know was that Aphrodite was holding a transparent bow in her hand and shooting an invisible arrow in a place that no one could see. Just as Alexander raised his head and saw the girl, Aphrodite's arrow hit him. The girl was going to the same place as Alexander, and she said to the gatekeeper, "Please inform him that my name is Yun-Nam-Na, and I wish to see Mr. Amon." The gatekeeper hurriedly replied, "Please wait a moment, I'll go in and report." At this moment, the girl seemed to sense something and turned to look at Alexander. Her gaze became very sharp, as if it could see through a person's heart. But Alexander felt that her eyes were so beautiful that they could move one's soul. However, to Alexander's disappointment, the girl's gaze swept past him, and then looked into an unknown distance, and she frowned deeply as if she was angry. She looked so charming even when she was angry, but what was she looking at? Alexander could not help but turn his head in the direction of her gaze, but there was nothing in the distance, not even a bird could be seen in the sky. Of course, Alexander could not find anything, but Yun-Nam-Na could sense the strange arrow that Aphrodite had secretly shot out. Looking at Alexander's expression, she also realized what had happened. If there was anyone who understood this trick of Aphrodite the best, it was, of course, Murin, the former goddess of youth and love of the Anunnaki divine clan. Alexander did not find anything and turned his gaze back to the girl. Just as the gatekeeper entered the door to report, he saw Amon personally come out of the door, opened his arms to the girl and said, "Yun-Nam-Na, why are you here?" Before the gatekeeper had time to report, Amon personally came out to greet her. Yun-Nam-Na walked up the steps and naturally threw herself into Amon's arms. She put her hands around his waist and said, "I'm here to see you, can't I? I know your identity here, so I came to report like an ordinary person. I didn't disturb you, did I?" Amon put his arm around the girl's shoulders and laughed. "I heard your footsteps and came out to greet you. Come in and talk." Of course, he also saw Alexander outside the door, and with his arm around the girl's waist, he turned around and said, "Your Royal Highness, you also have time to come over today? Madanzo is out, and Mr. Aristotle is in the study." Alexander could not help but ask, "Mr. Amon, this girl?" Amon smiled. "Her name is Yun-Nam-Na, and she specially came to the Kingdom of Macedonia to see me." After that, Amon went in with his arm around Yun-Nam-Na, leaving Alexander outside the door. An inexplicable sense of melancholy hit Alexander's heart again. He could not describe what he was feeling. From a purely rational point of view, this feeling of melancholy was ridiculous. He only took a glance at the girl, but it left such a deep impression on his soul, and his body and mind were indescribably shocked. But he also saw the girl and Amon being so intimate, so there was no need to guess her relationship with Amon. The attendant behind him whispered, "Your Royal Highness, let's go in." "Aren't you here to see teacher?" Alexander replied with a dull tone, "I suddenly feel a little uncomfortable today, and I want to go back." Then he turned around and was about to leave. At this time, Madanzo happened to come in from outside and was about to greet Alexander. Alexander stepped forward and grabbed his sleeve. "You came at the right time, I have something to ask you." Madanzo asked curiously, "What's the matter? Why are you so nervous?" Alexander asked, "Who is Yun-Nam-Na?" "I just saw a girl who called herself Yun-Nam-Na, and she came to see Mr. Amon." Madanzo was also shocked. "What? She's here? This is going to be interesting. Thank you for your reminder, but I'd better stay away today." Alexander asked, "What's wrong? Do you know her? Who is she?" Madanzo did not speak, but his voice sounded in Alexander's soul. "Your Royal Highness, haven't you heard of the legend of Igut? That Yun-Nam-Na is the wife of god Amon in the legend of Igut, Mute, and the original god of the continent, Murin." Alexander nodded, and his expression was indescribably strange. Madanzo asked curiously, "Your Royal Highness, what's wrong with you?" Alexander hurriedly waved his hand and said, "No, nothing. I'm just a little tired, and I want to go back and rest quickly." Alisanda's departure left Metatro somewhat baffled. And in Aju's small courtyard, Yun-Nam-Na's expression was not very good, and she was scolding Amon. "You asked me why I came here. Although this is the realm of Olympus, it is also a kingdom on earth. Why can't I come as an ordinary person? I don't know what happened here, and I'm just concerned about you. Aman just smiled apologetically and said, what did you hear? Yun Namna reached out and pinched Aman's waist and replied, since you came here, you must have met Artemis. Forget it, you used to be old friends. That day, I heard your song in heaven, praising the goddess of youth and love, and I thought you were singing for me. But then I heard a story. Aphrodite, the goddess of youth and love believed in by the Hydonians, shot Aman with an arrow of love, and Aman sang loudly for her. The goddess of love came to earth in the form of a beautiful girl, Helen. Aman vowed to bring her back to the kingdom of angels, but he angered Zeus, and now the lords of the two heavens are going to fight. After hearing such a story, how can I not worry about your safety? Shouldn't I come immediately? Aman still smiled apologetically and said, Yun Namna, you know that it's a rumor. It's just a story made up by bored people, would you believe it? Chapter 330. Aman chuckled in a very simple and honest manner. Of course I welcome you here. But the person who made this rumor was very accurate. Even if you knew it was a rumor, you would still come. Someone predicted that you would come. Yun Namna's expression had softened. She said in a coquettish tone, as long as you're happy. Aman grabbed her wrist and pulled her closer. Of course I'm happy. But I want to ask you a question. You mentioned the arrow of love just now. What is it? Yun Namna replied, I didn't understand it at first. I thought it was just a title. But I understood it just now. You should have also sensed it. Someone was shot by an arrow outside the door. It was actually a feeling of temptation. Aman nodded. Yes, I sensed it. Someone was secretly casting a spell on Alexander. When I went out to greet him, his mind was completely focused on you. You used to be the goddess of youth and love. You should know some tricks better than me. What is going on? Can the goddess of love make one person fall in love with another? If so, can you do it too? Yun Namna smiled bitterly. As the goddess of love, or the angel of youth and love, the question I can't answer is exactly what is love. I have heard countless prayers in the temple. People are asking the gods to bless them and make another person fall in love with them. But I have never used this method, except for one time. Aman asked, which time? Lion Taro King or Enkidu? Yun Namna gave him a slap. What nonsense are you talking about? That person was just a silly boy who didn't know anything. He had just come out of the mountains and came to the outside world. He wasn't as smart as he is now. I said I was a shepherdess and he believed me. He even accompanied me to find a lost lamb. But he didn't know that the lamb was himself. Aman smiled. Oh, you're talking about me. Did you shoot me too? Yun Namna said angrily, if that is called the arrow of love, then I suspect that the arrow hit your knee. You didn't react at all. Aman smiled. Who said that? I reacted. I was very tempted. Then, she softened her tone and said, but something's not right. The Alexander the First saw just now is obviously different from me at that time. Murin explained, everyone is different. Who knows what you are thinking in your heart? At that time, you were practicing the power of two sides. You just passed the test of devil's temptation. You weren't affected by me. Otherwise, you wouldn't have helped me win the bet with Enrol. I knew it clearly at that time. But Alexander is not you. Now you should understand why the goddess of love can't answer what love is. Because even the gods can't decide it. The arrow of love may have nothing to do with love. Aman shook his head. I still don't understand. Murin narrowed her eyes. Can you tell me why a person would fall in love with another person? What is this so-called love? Is it the cause or the result? Is there a necessity? Is there a should and shouldn't? Is there a possibility and an impossibility? Amon blinked. Well, I can't answer that. Murin pointed at Amon's chest. If even you can't answer that, then no one can. Amon said, let's talk about the arrow just now. You were standing next to Alexander. You should have sensed it more clearly than me. Murin said, I've already explained. It was a feeling of being tempted. It happened when he saw me. It can awaken the desire in the heart and resonate with the pursuit of the soul. There is a strange feeling in the body and mind that it is what you want. It seems to have left a mark in the soul, so he can't forget it. Alexander is just a mortal. He might have been thinking about such a question, and the arrow imprinted his soul. Amon blinked again. After beating around the bush, you might as well simply say that he fell in love with you. Yun Namna smiled bitterly again. To be more precise, he fell in love with me. That feeling of being tempted has merged with the desire of the soul. That arrow was successful. Amon frowned slightly. Was that a trap? If it was the effect of divine magic, it can also be eliminated with divine magic. However, Murin shook her head and said, even if you use the most brilliant blessing magic, you won't be able to make him not want to fall in love anymore, because this is his spontaneous reaction. Although it is caused by external factors, his soul has already been touched. His feelings belong to him. You can't make him not dream of me. Amon thought for a moment. Then there is only one way. Murin understood what Amon was talking about and reminded him, the imprint of the soul cannot be erased, but the memory can be sealed. However, sealing a piece of memory was something only gods could do. If you use this method on Alexander here, you will violate your agreement with Zeus. Why, are you unhappy? In fact, this method can't succeed unconditionally. It also depends on whether the target can arouse his love. Amon smiled apologetically again. This also proves that you are charming enough. Why wouldn't I be happy? But this is a trap that someone has set up for me. It's a trap that they want to use your arrival. As he spoke, Amon imprinted a message into Murin's soul, explaining a series of recent events. Murin also instantly understood that she had fallen into a trap. She frowned and said, this kind of small thing. This action is nothing more than to leave a shadow in Alexander's heart. Every time he sees you, he can't help but think of this matter, feel regret, and secretly sigh. Although he still respects you and won't say anything he shouldn't say, I'm afraid it's not a happy thing to always think of these things. This is the subtlety of emotions. Repeatedly prying open a small crack, over time, it can create a bigger crack. Amon asked, it's Aphrodite's method again. Why does she always do the same thing on such boring things? Murin grabbed Amon's hand. You have to be careful, this method is not boring at all. Although it's just a small problem, the accumulation of small problems over and over again can magnify the cracks that have not yet been seen. That is the inherent weakness of human nature. As the goddess of love, of course Aphrodite can use such methods, and I suspect that there is someone guiding her behind the scenes. It's a very clever plan. Apollo is no match for you. If they want to fight you directly, they may not be a match for anyone, but they used people related to you, including Medanzo, Alexander, and now I'm involved. As long as the gods exist in the world, they will have weaknesses. If you don't have a relationship with those around you, then why do you exist? So they are starting from here to achieve their goal. Murin was indeed an angel who had transcended eternal life and was once the goddess of youth and love. Although she was schemed against, when she came back to her senses, she saw through the matter very clearly. The one guiding Aphrodite was the goddess of wisdom, Yelena, and Murin revealed Yelena's plan and predicted that there would be trouble in the future. Amon nodded and said, in fact, Xerxes has already warned me of what will happen. This is also the test I have to face when I come here to seek confirmation. It seems to be just some boring trouble, but the means of the gods are often understood after the fact. I also want to thank you for coming here today. Although this is the result of the Olympian gods' plan, you have also reminded me. Murin said again, even I have been plotted against. It's embarrassing to stay here, so I'd better leave. Since you understand the other party's intentions, you have to be careful. Aman smiled and said, you don't have to be so anxious. Since you are here, it's not too late to leave tomorrow. I will accompany you around Macedonia. The next day, Yun Namna quietly left Macedonia and did not stay in the realm of Olympus. The next 2 months were peaceful, as if nothing had happened. Alexander did not mention this to anyone. He knew what he should not say. What he should not overthink. But in the dead of night, he could not help but think of Yun Namna and feel helpless and regretful. The young prince inexplicably experienced the feeling of falling in love. Was this all because of Aman? In fact, he knew very well that this had nothing to do with Aman. The wedding of Philip II's daughter and Alexander's sister was finally held. The bride's identity was special, and the wedding was held at the border of the Kingdom of Macedonia. It was originally the territory of the Turkic kingdom, which was occupied by Macedonia after the Hippocratic War. Both Philip II and Alexander attended the wedding. Alexander had already decided to choose a princess who would be the most helpful to the Kingdom of Macedonia in the future. He told his father about this decision, and Philip II was very happy. This child was so sensible. Aman, however, was a little worried and specifically told Madanzo to accompany Alexander. The purpose of this marriage arranged by Philip II was to control and annex Turkic, and there would certainly be people who would not want to see it. Thinking back to the time when Aman assassinated Emperor Sinak, it was also at a wedding. Whether there would be an accident or not, it was better to be prepared. Aman was prepared, but an accident still happened. At dusk on the day of the wedding, a mage rushed back to the capital on a flying spear to report that Philip II had been assassinated. The murderer assassinated the king and escaped with the help of his accomplices. When he fled to the border, he was caught and killed in the battle. Therefore, the motive of the king's assassination was forever a mystery. With the death of Philip II, if there were changes everywhere, the Kingdom of Macedonia would immediately face civil strife. Philip II had fought countless battles in his life, but his death was so sudden that no one could have expected it. Fortunately, he had made various arrangements before his death, and Alexander firmly controlled the kingdom's army. Madanzo promptly escorted Alexander back to the capital and let His Highness take charge of the situation and ascend the throne as soon as possible to stabilize the situation. Of course, Aman had to ask Madanzo about this. Since he was there, why did he let the assassin succeed? And Madanzo was also very helpless. He was talking to a group of beautiful princesses with Alexander when the assassin suddenly attacked. No one could guard against this assassin's assassination. He was an 8th-level warrior, and his identity was actually the captain of Philip II's bodyguards. After the assassination, people talked about it and made all kinds of speculations, but no one could figure out why the assassin did it. After returning to the capital, Alexander never saw Aman again. The young prince bore the pain of losing his father and still had to take control of the kingdom in the midst of sudden changes. Zeus had sent down an oracle to bless the new king, and Alexander announced his succession on the same day he returned to Macedonia. He still needed to hold a formal enthronement ceremony, pray to the gods under the auspices of the priests, and accept the congratulations of the ministers and people before he could become the legitimate new king. Therefore, Alexander had a lot of things to deal with recently and had no time to visit Aristotle. Aristotle was also very busy, living in the palace for many days in a row, taking care of many ceremonial matters for Philip II's funeral and Alexander's ascension to the throne. Aman still lived in Aristotle's residence, as if he had become a forgotten man with nothing to do. After the assassination of Philip II, another rumor appeared all over Macedonia, and it turned out to be about Aman. Back then, Aman had a ferocious nickname, the Emperor's Killer. All the emperors who had met or had close contact with Aman had all met a good end, and almost all of them died a violent death in a very short period of time. Some people mentioned Aman again when discussing the death of Philip II, claiming that the mysterious assassination of Philip II was because of Aman's curse. Many of the people who spread this rumor did not know who Aman was, or even heard of Aman's name, but because of the assassination of Philip II, the story of Aman quickly spread around Macedonia. It was said that such an evil god from a foreign country had quietly entered Macedonia and met Philip II, which led to the tragedy. The people who talked about this had never seen Aman, and most of them did not know that Aman lived in Aristotle's residence. Such a rumor sounded ridiculous, and those who knew it were very clear that the death of Philip II had nothing to do with Aman, and no one mentioned it in front of Aman, but how could Aman not hear it? Aman could only smile bitterly. It turned out that he also had a curse, just like Murin's famous love curse, that made people feel helpless. He did not say anything, but waited quietly, waiting for someone to mention it to him in person. On the day before the enthronement ceremony of the new king, Aristotle, who had been busy for many days, finally returned to his residence. He specially came to see Aman, and it was Madanzo who accompanied him. Madanzo's expression was somewhat awkward and resentful, but Aristotle's expression was very calm, with only a trace of fatigue and regret. Madanzo told Aman what kind of rumors had been spreading in the kingdom of Macedonia recently, and finally gritted his teeth and said, "I don't know who deliberately created this kind of rumor, just to force you to leave Macedonia, so that Alexander would never see you again or hate you. But the person who created the rumor did not succeed, because Alexander did not believe it, and he still invited you to the ceremony." Aman sighed and said, "Madanzo, you don't have to be angry. This can't be completely considered a rumor. People saw the truth that they saw, and what happened in the past was indeed like this. The misfortunes of those emperors had their own reasons for their misfortunes, but people blamed it on me." Aristotle also sighed and said, "When my teacher Plato was lecturing on epistemology, he once told a story. There was a group of prisoners who lived in a cave since they were young. Their whole bodies were tied up, and they could not move or turn their heads. They could only look at the back wall of the cave. Behind them, there was a bonfire. Between the bonfire and the prisoners, there were people holding up various kinds of dolls, making movements, sometimes talking, sometimes silent. The prisoners could only see the images projected on the wall of the cave, and this was the world that they could see. They would treat these images as reality, and the echoes of the cave as the words of the images. People could only understand what they could see, and it was difficult for their understanding to go beyond what they could see. If a prisoner broke free from the shackles, turned around and walked out of the cave, then he would be able to find the source of the images." Aman smiled bitterly and said, "Sir, thank you for enlightening me. Is this the source of my so-called killer of emperors curse? Are you also hinting at the meaning of transcending immortality? In fact, I know in my heart that I am like that prisoner who broke free from the shackles." Aristotle explained again, "I know that I don't have to say these words to you. I just told Alexander the story of Plato's teacher to answer the rumor about you in the kingdom. Therefore, Alexander still decided to invite you to the ceremony." Madanzo gave a thumbs up and said, "This child has courage and guts." Aman waved his hand and said, "You haven't finished yet, continue." Aristotle also smiled bitterly and said, "But the ministers opposed it. Those loyal to Alexander even pulled out their swords and tried to persuade him to never see you again." Aristotle finally said the crux of the problem. Even if Alexander himself did not care about this rumor, others would. The more loyal the minister to the new king, the more they wanted to stop Alexander from seeing Aman. Those who were willing to serve Alexander even swore to dissuade him. This was their loyalty to Alexander, so it was not convenient for Alexander to reprimand them. Aman replied, "I understand." In order to show his attitude, Alexander invited me to the ceremony. And for the safety of the new king, the loyal ministers will never allow him to see me. It seems to be a difficult problem. Which is more important, the authority of the king or the loyalty of the people? But this problem is very easy to solve. As long as I refuse the invitation, no one will be put in a difficult position. Aristotle nodded and said, "That's how it is. In fact, there is no need for me to say anything. You will make this decision yourself. But I still have to tell you everything. This is my responsibility." Madanzo said angrily, I must trace the source of the rumor. Find out who spread it. However, Amon shook his head and looked up at the sky. He said, there is no need to trace it. I know who it is. These people did not make up anything. They only told people something that happened and let people see the shadow on the cave. Mr. Aristotle, it was you who brought me to Macedonia, and I don't want to put you in a difficult position. Chapter 331. Hearing that Amon was about to leave, Madanzo cried out involuntarily. If that's the case, aren't you letting someone get away with it? Their goal is to force you to leave. Amon looked up at the sky and replied, when people think they have achieved their goals, they often find out in the end that it wasn't as they wished. They don't know why I'm here, but since they've put in so much effort to make me leave, let them think they've succeeded. Please think carefully about why I'm leaving, and what do they get? In Olympus, Zeus, the father of the gods, questioned the gods in anger, who can tell me why Philip II was assassinated? Hermes, the messenger of the gods, stepped forward and answered, since ancient times, many emperors have not had a good ending. Is it strange that Philip II had such an encounter? It would be strange if an emperor who swore to conquer didn't encounter many assassinations in his life. The only difference was whether the assassination was successful or not. Zeus' anger did not diminish. If he was injured or killed on the battlefield, it's not a big deal. But for a captain of the king's bodyguard to assassinate him at a wedding, don't tell me that there wasn't a god behind this. Can any of you explain why he did this? Apollo stepped forward and answered, my father, please calm down. Philip II was the king of Macedonia, and with the help of Alexander, he conquered the other states of the Macedonian peninsula, not in the form of an alliance, but directly annexed states such as Macedonia and made them worship the Macedonian god. This was his achievement on earth, but the gods lost their independent divine realm, and this action is equivalent to challenging the gods as mortals. The gods can also take revenge on Philip II and his son. Zeus took out his thunder staff and pointed it at Apollo and the other gods. Don't forget your promise not to stop the kingdom of Macedonia from unifying the Hetan Peninsula and taking back your lost interests when fighting back against the Boz Empire. Since everyone has made an agreement, why would anyone do such a thing? Apollo explained, the gods did not violate the agreement, and they are willing to see the kingdom of Macedonia unify the Hetan Peninsula and expand outward, but supporting the kingdom of Macedonia does not mean supporting Philip II. The gods can still punish him for his offense. In fact, we all know the arrangement between you and Amon. The person you care about is not Philip II, but Alexander. Philip II could not have fulfilled your wishes. Everything he did was to pave the way for Alexander's exploits. The more perfect Philip II's preparations were, the more successful Alexander would be. Now, it is time for Alexander to step onto the stage. The sooner he controls Macedonia, the easier it will be for your plan to be realized, so you don't have to blame him for anything. Zeus then looked at Aphrodite and said, in that case, how do you explain the arrow of love that was shot at Alexander? Aphrodite took half a step back and replied, just now, Apollo has said that the gods can take revenge on Philip II and his son, but because of the agreement of the gods, my arrow did not hurt him. It only made him fall in love with someone he shouldn't love. This does not affect your plan. I am only targeting Amon. The agreement of the Olympian gods does not include Amon. He is not a god here. At this moment, Zeus heard Amon's voice. Zeus, please tell the goddess of wisdom, Yelena, that she is ruthless. I will let her have her way and leave the Hetan Peninsula today. When I was here, I did not violate the agreement between us. I never acted as a god in the divine realm of Olympus. I chose a state and helped you complete your plan to unify the divine realm. I will help you complete your plan to unify the divine realm. Now, we are still collaborators. I can come back anytime. If one day I return to the divine realm of Olympus, but not in the way I do today, that will mean the end of our cooperation. In the Olympian heaven, there are some gods who want to break with me. Please tell them that my purpose of coming and leaving has nothing to do with them, and I am only completing my own search for proof. If this continues, it will be the dusk of Olympus. You are also responsible for the actions of the gods." After saying this, Amon's voice disappeared. Zeus was still holding the staff of thunder, and his anger had not subsided. "You have succeeded, Amon has left. I want to ask you, why did you force him to leave, and why did you do so many things?" At this time, Hera put her hand on Zeus' shoulder and advised, "Lord of Heaven, please put away your weapons and don't be so angry. The gods have made an agreement with you, but it does not mean that they are willing to forgive Amon. I think this is also for your own good." Zeus slowly put away the staff of thunder and turned his head. "So you are the one behind the scenes? No wonder they were so daring. Doing this for my own good? Trying to make Amon no longer cooperate with me, what reason do you have?" Yelena stepped forward and said, "My father, in fact, I understand your purpose. You want to seek higher achievements, so you cooperate with Amon and confirm Marduk's previous attempt. The realm you pursue is to be able to integrate another heaven like Olympus." With the death of Philip II, Alexander personally took control of the kingdom of Macedon. The wheel of history is unstoppable, and the Macedonian army will sweep the continent and conquer Igut. Amon's divine realm will be integrated into the divine realm of Olympus, and the human world will probably confirm this. If you can't achieve the achievements you vowed by then it means that this attempt is not feasible. And in any case, sooner or later you will clash with Amon, or sooner or later he will become your enemy. If Amon remains in Macedon and personally guides Alexander to complete such a feat, then is this his quest or your quest? Then will the divine realm of Amon sweep the continent or the divine realm of Olympus? My father, history is only unfolding, and he should withdraw from the stage, so Hera will say that this is for your own good. Zeus narrowed his eyes. But my cooperation with Amon has not ended, he has only left temporarily. Yelena smiled. You don't have to break your agreement with him, I have my own ways to make him withdraw from your cooperation. At this time, Ares quietly asked Hermes, "You are the god who travels the world the most. Can you tell me why we kicked Amon out?" Hermes replied, "If Amon and Zeus continue to cooperate, they will only get what they want, and it will not benefit us." Why did he say that? Philip II's unification of the Khitan Peninsula violated the interests of the gods and led to a war of divine messengers. Later, the gods reached a new agreement to make up for the loss of the Khitan Peninsula by expanding the divine realm of Olympus to the continent. The larger the new divine realm developed by the Olympian gods, the more benefits the gods would reap. But there was a foreign god, Amon, in the middle. Alexander once promised that even if he reached Igut, he would sacrifice to Amon and rebuild the temple of Isis, which was not what the Olympian gods wanted. Zeus's purpose might be to seek a higher realm, and the reason why the gods reached a compromise was to pursue greater benefits in the expansion. But if they let Amon continue to cooperate with Zeus, the biggest beneficiary besides Zeus would probably be Amon. So the gods wanted to destroy this cooperation, and some gods were even unwilling to let Zeus achieve his wish. According to Zeus's best expectations, if he could prove his vow in the future and merge the Olympian kingdom with Amon's kingdom of angels, it would be equivalent to Amon joining the Olympian gods in another way. This definitely wasn't a good thing for the original sovereigns. Amon would become the most important god in the Olympian gods besides Zeus. Apollo and the others would not be a match for him, and the benefits of the divine realm's expansion would probably only be divided between Amon and Zeus. So Yelena and the others repeatedly tried to kick Amon out, and they even got Hera's support behind the scenes. Forcing Amon away was only the first step. If they really wanted to get Amon out, they probably had to have another plan. Zeus listened to Yelena's words and narrowed his eyes, no longer angry. No one knew what the king of Olympus was thinking. In the mortal kingdom of Macedonia, Amon was saying goodbye to Aristotle. This time, he came all the way to the Khitan Peninsula to seek confirmation and worked with Zeus to come up with the boldest plan in the mortal world. Although he was forced to leave by the Olympian gods, Amon also gained a lot. The most important enlightenment did not come from the gods, but from the two mortals, Aesop and Aristotle. From their words and deeds, Ammon had a lot of new insights. Before leaving, Ammon said to Medanzo, "I want to leave here and return to heaven. You have not transcended eternal life, so you should go back to the Garden of Eden first." Medanzo shook his head and said, "No, I want to stay in Macedonia." Ammon frowned slightly. "You want to stay alone? You no longer have my protection. As an emissary of another god, you will stay alone in the realm of Olympus. You know that the gods are watching you with hostile eyes. If you are not careful, you may be destroyed. Why take such a risk?" Medanzo replied, "I came here with my own reasons for seeking confirmation. I helped Alexander design the military formation, drill the army, and taught him everything I could. He also promised me that he would help and allow David to establish the kingdom of Valon in the future, offer sacrifices in your temple, and rebuild the temple of Isis. In this case, I will continue to help him until I witness him fulfill his promise, which is also equivalent to witnessing what I want. My God, please allow me to stay." For the first time, Ammon showed a look of approval for this disciple. He smiled and said, "Well, I allow you to stay. It is not so easy to reach the end of human cultivation. Since you have made the decision, this is your chance. Even if there is the danger of death, you have to face it. I bless you, Medanzo, I will wait for you in heaven." After Ammon finished speaking, he turned and walked out of the courtyard. The people in the courtyard saw him walk out, but the people outside did not see him walk out. The gods seemed to disappear into the void, not even leaving a ripple in the air. The next moment, Ammon appeared in heaven. Because in the realm of Olympus, Ammon could not act as a god and could not use the means of the gods, and it was not his realm, he did not know what was happening. The angels who stayed in heaven, led by Seagull, welcomed the return of Ammon. However, Ammonius suddenly frowned, turned around, and disappeared again. As soon as Ammonius returned to heaven, he turned around and went to the human world. Because something unexpected had happened, Murin and Jia Lai had also rushed back to the Rose Garden. The Rose Garden was originally the divine palace of Murin, the goddess of youth and love in the Anunnaki divine clan. The goddess herself also came here, but it was mainly used as a place for the divine emissaries to live and practice. The divine palace was protected by a magic formation, isolated from the outside world, almost equivalent to another world. Even if ordinary people came here, they would not find any trace of the divine palace. The divine emissaries living in the divine palace naturally knew how to open the door to enter and exit. If it was anyone else, even a god, without permission, they would not be able to enter unless they attacked by force. But the price of forcibly breaking the protective formation and the spatial boundary of the divine palace was also considerable, and it was much easier to defend a divine palace than to break it. Therefore, for the divine emissaries, this was a peaceful world. When the expansion of the Great Light Divine Clan extended the divine realm to the entire continent, the divine realm of the Anunnaki Divine Clan had been lost. But the divine palaces of the gods were still there. Later, when Ammon merged the Anunnaki Divine Kingdom and the Ennead Divine Kingdom, the gods became angels, and their divine palaces in the human world also became a paradise for angels. Only those who were guided could enter, and Murin's Rose Garden was one of them. But today, something unthinkable had happened. Even the gods were surprised. A rose, a thief had entered the garden. If it was the courtyard of an ordinary family, the thief might not go through the front door but climb over the wall. But that was the divine palace on earth, the paradise of angels. There was a spatial magic formation separating it, and it was in a desolate place on the Saya Plateau. How could someone sneak in? Since it was a thief, of course, it was impossible to open the door in the normal way. If a god found this divine palace and wanted to force his way in, he would have to break the protective formation. But such a bizarre thing happened. There was just one person who sneaked into the Rose Garden without the divine emissaries noticing. Not only did he sneak in by himself, but he also brought in a companion. To use the analogy of a courtyard in the human world, the two of them, of course, did not enter through the gate, nor did they climb over the wall, but through the wall. And as soon as they entered, they got into trouble. The first person they met in the rose garden was the former saintess of Babylon, Wendy. Wendy was singing among the flowers at that time, and one of them saw Wendy and said to the other, "This girl is quite beautiful, how did she get possessed?" The other person stared with wide eyes and said, "Since we met, let's help her." With that said, he waved his hand, and Wendy woke up. Wendy may have been under the most brilliant message magic in the world. It was an illusion that Amon had left in her soul, but for Wendy, it was a very real experience. Amon could not awaken the power of Wendy's origin, and the gods could not let everyone they met achieve great things. In this life, Wendy could only be a mortal. So when Amon left the Garden of Eden the last time, he used a magic to make Wendy think that he was still here with her, living a happy life all these years. Wendy was singing to Amon among the flowers when she heard a snap of her fingers, and Amon suddenly disappeared. The rose garden was still the rose garden, but in front of her were two strange people. She couldn't help but let out a cry of alarm, not because of the appearance of these two people, but because of Amon's sudden disappearance and the inexplicable appearance of the strangers. This cry of alarm alarmed the gods. Murin was in the kingdom of heaven, and she was the first to discover the situation. At that time, she was shocked. What thief in the world could sneak into the rose garden? It must be the invasion of an unknown demon or a foreign god. Jia Lai was the second to discover the situation, but her speed was faster than Murin, and she was the first to rush to the rose garden from the kingdom of heaven. As a guardian angel, how could Jia Lai allow such a thing to happen? She appeared directly in front of Wendy and noticed that the intruder had just broken Amon's magic. She waved the blade of order and slashed at it. Behind her, Wendy exclaimed, "Jia Lai! Stop!" Why did she stop Jia Lai's attack? Because the silver arc of the blade of order was slashing at a child, the one who inexplicably penetrated the space barrier of the rose garden and broke Ammonius' magic. Jia Lai was experienced in battle and had seen many demons and monsters. She was never fooled by the appearance of the enemy. But when Wendy saw the child, she couldn't bear to let Jia Lai hurt him. It was a little boy, his face was pale and rosy, and he looked like he was at most 5 or 6 years old. His appearance was very special, never seen in the heaven's pivot continent. His head was shaved, leaving only a peach shape on the top of his head to his forehead. He wore a small robe that seemed to be woven from silver, with wide sleeves that almost reached the ground, and a golden belt. The child looked so cute that Wendy almost wanted to hug and kiss him when she saw him. However, as soon as Jia Lai appeared, he slashed with his axe. The little boy broke Amon's magic and was giggling at another little girl beside him. The little girl was his companion. She looked even smaller and cuter. She looked to be only 4 or 5 years old. She wore a bright red and green jacket. Her tender little face looked like it could be broken by a blow, and her big eyes were incomparably clear. Suddenly, Jia Lai appeared and slashed with his axe. The blade of order had the power to cut through space, and nothing tangible could stop it. The little boy was shocked and jumped up and shouted, "Oh, so fierce." He waved his sleeves and turned into a ball of light, covering himself and the little girl. The arc of the blade of order slashed through the void, and the figures of the two children were revealed again, their bodies unharmed. Jia Lai was surprised. What a clever method, where did he come from? The little boy looked down at his sleeve and curled his mouth as if he was about to cry. Then he looked up and pointed at Jia Lai, "You woman, you are too fierce. Why did you hurt me without saying a word?" Chapter 332. At this moment, Murin had arrived and happened to appear beside Jia Lai. Seeing this scene, she was deeply shocked. But she immediately revealed a smile and stepped forward to smile at the two children. "Hold your anger, may I ask where did you come from?" The young boy was stunned when he saw Murin, but he still puffed up his cheeks. We are not supernatural beings, we came here to pick herbs in the mountains. We came here by mistake and saw someone bewitched by the flowers. But this person suddenly appeared out of nowhere and used an artifact. What kind of logic is this? The little girl secretly tugged at his sleeve. Brother Gomang, something's not right. This is clearly someone else's paradise. That girl has no cultivation or powers, but she seems to have been reborn. Although she was bewitched, it didn't seem to harm her. Murin continued smiling. This is my rose garden. You barged in without even greeting me and broke my divine spell. It's inevitable that you'll be mistaken for demons. Even if you're a guest, you can't ignore the host and cause trouble the moment you enter. Jia Lai Gang. I thought you were going to harm Wendy. Murin saw that the two children were not easy to deal with. Their origins and intentions were unclear, so she greeted them with a smile. She wanted to calm them down first to avoid any unexpected conflict. The young boy saw that she spoke kindly and smiled beautifully, so he cupped his meaty fists in front of his chest. It looked like he was bowing. We come from Kunlun. We pick snow chrysanthemums from the cold and high mountains. Just as we stretched out our branches, we saw flowers blooming like brocade. But we didn't see Jinshui beside us. We knew we had entered the paradise, so we pulled Jinshui in and coincidentally saw this girl singing in the flowers. We didn't mean to barge in, but this girl was bewitched for some other reason. I'm afraid it's a misunderstanding. So this is your cave abode. May I ask which immortal you are? The Jinshui he spoke of should be the little girl's name. That should be the name of that little girl. They claimed to have come from a place called Kunlun. While Murin was confused, she finally understood what he meant. The young boy called the rose garden a paradise. Since Murin was the owner of this place, then this was her immortal cave abode. These two children were clearly gods, but they claimed that they were not ghosts or gods, and they also called Murin a celestial being. At this time, Jia Lai heard Amon's voice in his soul, put away your weapons, don't start a fight, these two gods have no ill intentions. Murin also heard Amon's voice in her soul. These two children have a special background and may be very important to me. Try to ask them to stay as guests. As the voice echoed, Amon appeared beside Wendy. Wendy came to her senses when she saw Amon. She grabbed his sleeve and said, "What happened just now? Why did you suddenly disappear?" Those two kids are so cute, please don't hurt them, Amon said softly, there was something urgent just now, so I went to deal with it. Don't worry, those two kids are guests of the Rose Garden. Yun Nam Na will treat them well. The boy named Gomang was alarmed when he saw Amon appear. He reached out to pull Zhen Shui back and took 2 steps back. He wore a wary look as he said, another immortal. Today, he had really entered the immortal mountain by mistake. It's our fault for trespassing and breaking the spell, but that axe strike just now was a little too fierce. We have no ill intentions, and if you don't welcome us, then we'll take our leave. Jia Lai had already put away his axe. He stepped forward and bowed, "Two gods, your arrival is too strange. No matter who it is, it's hard to avoid misunderstandings. If we offended you just now, please don't take it to heart." The little girl named Zhen Shui pouted and said, "Didn't I tell you that we're not ghosts or gods? Why do you always call me that?" Murin had already walked over with a smile, "This is just a form of respect, just like how you called me an immortal just now. It's rare for the Rose Garden to have guests, and today is a rare occasion. Since it was just a misunderstanding, there's no need to fuss over it. I have strange flowers and herbs that never wilt in the 4 seasons here. There's also good wine and delicacies. If you like it, you can have fun here. Big sister is very happy to entertain 2 guests from afar." Zhen Shui frowned again. She looked at Murin and said, "How old are you for me to call you big sister?" These words were really funny. After transcending eternal life, one would not remember the passage of time in the mortal world, and a god's appearance was a reflection of their state of mind. Therefore, gods did not care about their age. Zhen Shui could not just call Murin big sister, she could even call her auntie. However, she still wrinkled her nose and spoke very seriously. Murin could only smile and reply, then you can call me Yun Nam Na. At this moment, Wendy also stepped forward and stretched out her arms, saying pleasantly, I'm Wendy, and I live here. Little brother, little sister, welcome to the rose garden to play. Gomang frowned and seemed a little unwilling, but he did not dodge. His arm, along with his magical feather sleeve, was actually grabbed by the mortal Wendy. Wendy also grabbed Zhen Shui's hand and pulled the two children over. Gomang asked Zhen Shui softly, are we going to play here? Zhen Shui replied, since we're here, let's take a look. This place is very beautiful. Didn't we come to look for strange flowers and herbs? Perhaps there are some that we haven't found yet. Amon did not entertain guests in the distant palace at the foot of the mountain. He beckoned to the grassy slope beside the flowering shrubs and a beautiful tent appeared. There were already tables, chairs, and fine wine set up in the tent. Ever since he avoided the Lion King in the desert, Amon had always had this habit of entertaining guests, mainly to entertain great achievers of special status. The two children were not surprised by Amon's fear. They walked into the tent and sat down, looking like two adults, cute and playful. Murin almost couldn't resist reaching out to pat Gomang's head, but she did not do so. She knew very well that this child was not simple, and his achievements were not inferior to hers. The elf maid Shubra was still in the Garden of Eden, but there were other oracles in the rose garden. Everyone rushed over upon hearing the news. However, Amon waved the oracles away and personally poured wine for Gomang. When it was in front of Zhen Shui, the little girl shook her head and said, I don't want to drink anymore. She had two slanted pigtails, and when she shook her head, the pigtails swayed in an interesting manner. Wendy poured a light rose-colored, transparent drink into Zhen Shui's cup. Zhen Shui sniffed and said, is this made with the honey of thorny rose flower? Wendy replied, it's honey from a type of wild flower at the foot of the mountain. I didn't know it was called thorny rose flower. Did I make it myself? Is it good? Zhen Shui took a small sip and felt the sweet fragrance permeate her body. She couldn't help but nod and praise, this honey can heal internal injuries and assist in the recovery of the cauldron. It also has the effect of relaxing the circulation of spiritual energy. It's really good stuff. Also, it's pure and untainted. If you made it yourself, Big Sister is a good person. She actually called Wendy Big Sister and said she was a good person. Murin couldn't help but cover her mouth and laugh, if Wendy is a good person, then we're not. Of course, she was joking, but Gomang answered seriously, other than her, none of you are human. The entire table laughed. Other than Wendy, none of them were considered human. Amon, Jia Lai, and Murin had transcended eternal life and were a different kind of existence. As for Gomang and Zhen Shui, there was no need to mention them. After Gomang said that, he raised his cup and drank. The way the child drank gave Amon a fright. Amon naturally took out the best wine in the heaven's pivot continent. However, the child's posture made it seem like he was pouring it into his mouth instead of tasting it. With a gulp, he emptied the cup. Amon asked, Mr. Gomang, how is this wine? Gomang frowned slightly and said in a pompous manner, it should be good, but it's not my usual taste. Jia Lai and Murin's expressions changed slightly. This child sure had a big mouth. Zhen Shui handed his cup over. Brother Gomang, if you don't like wine, try this. It's delicious. Gomang didn't take the cup. Amon sensed that he had scanned it with something akin to a detection spell before answering, although the nectar of auspicious grass thorny rose is not bad, it's best if you want to use it as a cultivation vessel and aid in the circulation of divine energy. Dan's so-called auspicious rose honey isn't honey, but the essence of dew. Wendy, since you can use this to entertain your guests, we can't just drink it for free. I'll give you the auspicious rose honey later, and you can harvest it as well. Murin hurriedly said, the oracles here love the nectar that Wendy harvests. It's indeed beneficial for cultivation. I've been growing these flowers in the rose garden for a long time. Absorbing the essence of the flower's aura is very beneficial. This is a God segment, but I've never thought of using another segment to condense it into an object. Gomang answered, Immortal Duan Shan fakes external objects, but that doesn't necessarily mean the pill will be formed. However, the completed pill can be taken and given to others. You should have thought of this long ago. The more Amon listened, the more curious he became. The two gods in front of him were like an unknown world to him. He poured another cup of wine for Gomang and said, It's good that you don't mind Jia Lai's conflict with you. Seeing that your Duan Gao Chao is here, I have to thank you for not retaliating. Otherwise, you might have hurt her. Unexpectedly, Gomang put down his cup and said, I wouldn't have hurt her. I'm just a body formed from a strand of my thoughts. Although I have great divine powers, I don't have great dermic powers. Her strike wasn't able to hurt me. It's just that the divine artifact had sliced through my sleeve, but I couldn't do anything to her. True Water held up his cup and said, You were indeed mistaken. Brother Gomang wouldn't have hurt Wendy. He never harms any living beings in the world. It was just that when he saw Wendy's appearance, he mistakenly thought. Amon coughed in time to cut off Truewater's words. His cough also imprinted information from the divine spell into his soul, explaining Wendy's identity and the reason he had used the divine spell. The two children immediately reacted. Gomang grinned at Amon. So you were the one who did it. You weren't harming anyone. I thought I was helping someone, but my good intentions nearly spoiled a good thing. Amon had already carefully measured the two children's auras. They were naturally not mortals, but he couldn't tell what kind of existence they were. In terms of the realm of the gods, these two children weren't higher than him, but they were precisely in the realm that he didn't understand. Amon was able to keep his composure and wasn't in a hurry to get to the bottom of the matter. Instead, he changed the topic. There's no need to point out what happened just now. In any case, I thank you for your good intentions. I should call you immortals. That should be what you call yourselves. I've never seen immortals like you on the continent. May I ask if you're from the world of Mahasvara? True Water frowned and shook his pigtails. No, how could we be from that place? Do you think we look like Mahasvara? Gomang also put down his cup and asked in return, You know Bushuan? Amon was slightly taken aback. Marduk's other name was Bushuan. This was still a secret on the continent. He didn't expect the child to directly call out Bushuan's name. He replied with a wry smile, Not only do I know him, I've had many dealings with him. Gomang added, He's a very interesting person with great powers of bewitchment. Be careful when dealing with him. Amon nodded in agreement. Thank you for the reminder. I've been very careful. May I ask if you're from the Buddhist kingdom of Amateus? In addition to Bushuan's Mahasvara, the other guidance Amon knew was from Amateus. As for the Buddhist kingdom of Amateus, he had heard Xitigarbha and Vincent mention it before. This time it was Gomang's turn to be slightly surprised. You've seen Amateus? Amon replied, I've met him once. As he spoke, he used message magic to imprint the scene of him seeing Amateus into Gomang's and Truewater's souls. Truewater opened her small mouth and said in an envious tone, So you've seen the manifestation of Amateus in the world. What a blessing! We haven't seen him, and he's not a disciple of the Buddhist kingdom of Amateus. Amateus has reached the unseen realm, and his achievements are above the golden immortal realm. Amon frowned. May I ask about your origins? Truewater replied with a smile, We're Gomang and Truewater. Wasn't that obvious? How could Amon know Gomang and Truewater? Truewater's words naturally had a magical effect similar to message magic. However, it wasn't like message magic that directly imprinted into the soul. Instead, it explained their origins to those who could hear it. In fact, the two children had been speaking with this strange, divine power. Otherwise, as a mortal, Wendy wouldn't have been able to understand what they were talking about. This was because they were speaking in a language other than that of the heaven's pivot continent. Yet, they could converse freely with Amon and company. They came from the distant east, a place called Kunlun. However, what Amon saw wasn't the two gods themselves. Instead, it was the manifestation of the two gods in meditation. Amon didn't know the names of the two gods, but the children in front of him had their own names. They were Gomang and Truewater. In fact, in terms of achievements, Amon should be above the two gods, but the ingenuity of the realm was different. Gomang and Truewater were like gods, but not gods. They had great divine power, but no great magic power. No wonder Amon couldn't see what kind of existence they were. Amon couldn't help but think of the divine power, and God's eye, that Vincent Boss had discussed with him. Vincent Boss was from the heaven's pivot continent and clearly knew the gods here. However, the two children didn't know that they had come here by chance. Tracing the veins of the mountains to collect the seeds of strange flowers and plants, they accidentally went too far and ended up on the Saya Plateau. Amon couldn't help but ask, "Then may I ask who am I talking to?" Truewater smiled and pointed at Wendy. Who was she singing to in the flowers just now? Amon smiled and didn't continue to dwell on the question. He asked, "Just now, Yun Nam Na called you gods, but you were very unhappy and claimed that you weren't a god. What's going on?" He naturally raised the question he was most concerned about in the conversation. His soul vaguely felt that this question was very important, as if it was the key to unlocking the proof of his search. He was very eager for the two children to explain. Unexpectedly, Gomang put down his cup and spread his arms. "Judging from your realm, you should be above me as a golden immortal." He mentioned another word. The voice of a golden immortal was naturally accompanied by an explanation. Those who could understand it could accept it, but those who couldn't understand it couldn't hear it. This was the achievement of the God of Gods that Artemis mentioned. She could use her soul imprint and cultivation to see that she could create a world in the undying eternity and receive disciples who had transcended eternal life. She could also share it with the angels or the gods, causing it to grow and become more colorful. Furthermore, the gods' body and soul aren't bound by this world. They can freely come and go as they please. However, Gomang's oath of a golden immortal was different from Amon's. The concept of a golden immortal was very different from the so-called master of a celestial system or kingdom of heaven in the heaven's pivot continent. It was only in terms of realm, so he was referring to a golden immortal. Truewater said, "Brother Gomang, there's no harm in discussing it with him. Buddhism has the boy of good fortune, 53 ginseng. Although he isn't on the same path and his achievements are higher than yours, he can still ask you questions." Murin was very clever. Although she didn't fully understand what they were talking about, she roughly understood Amon's intentions. These questions couldn't be answered in a few words. She had to be willing to answer. She immediately stood up. "There's no hurry. Since we're guests, let's start the feast first. There's wine and honey here. Let's try the delicacies that Amon and I made." Gomang waved his sleeves. "That's right. Let's eat first." Murin and Amon exchanged looks and smiled. They began making delicacies on the table. Amon made roasted meat and thick soup. Murin took out a stone pancake. This was a common dish in the heaven's pivot continent, but in their hands, it was an unparalleled delicacy. Even emperors rarely enjoyed it. Shuedingzhen had loved Amon's cooking. The tempting aroma wafted in the air, making people salivate uncontrollably. In such a beautiful place, watching the gods concoct rare delicacies in the human world with their own eyes was already a great enjoyment in life, even if they hadn't tasted it yet. Gomang whispered. "It looks good." Truewater wrinkled her nose. "They don't look like barbarians. Why are they doing it in front of us?" Although immortals aren't particular about it, this isn't how humans treat their guests. Gomang shook his head slightly. "Doing it in front of us and eating without chopsticks is indeed not how we treat our guests. Although they have attained the Tao, they are still people outside of society. Eating is like cooking on the streets. But you don't have to be too calculative when he's diligent and attentive. Chapter 333. What did the two children mean? Zhen Shui was puzzled. Why did Aman and Muran bring the food that should have been prepared in the kitchen to the dining table? If they were really entertaining guests, they should have soaked the meat with seasonings, cooked it, and cut it into pieces before serving it on a plate. They shouldn't have roasted it by the side of the table with oil and smoke wafting everywhere. It would have been fine if they were having a picnic, but it was odd for them to have a formal banquet in a cave abode on their first meeting. Aman and Muran had personally prepared delicacies for their guests, making Zhen Shui curious. Yet, Gomang had persuaded Zhen Shui not to fuss over it. It left him at a loss whether to laugh or cry. As for Aman, he actually heard their conversation while he was focused. Therefore, he didn't serve a large piece of roasted meat, but instead sliced the meat into small pieces and placed them on a plate. The two children didn't use knives or extend their hands. Instead, they pointed at the flower branches beside them. For thin twigs that were less than a foot long flew over. The twigs peeled off and turned into two pairs of thin sticks. They cleverly used the sticks between their fingers to pick up food. From time to time, they would reach out to scoop soup with a spoon. It looked magical and elegant, leaving Wendy dumbfounded. Deities didn't need to eat, but that didn't mean they couldn't. They could still enjoy the delicacies of the mortal world. After eating for a while, Gomang put down the two sticks in his hands before Aman could ask a question. Thank you for your hospitality. You had something to ask me. Why do you claim to not be a supernatural being? But do you have to explain why you call me a deity? What do you mean by a deity? Aman wanted to ask about cultivation, but he had to first explain his situation to Gomang. Only then would Gomang know what he wanted to ask. What was a deity? This question wasn't easy to answer. The traditional deities of the heavens pivot continent were those who had transcended eternal life. However, Aman was worshipped as the only god. He had received his guidance, transcended eternal life, and called himself an angel. It wasn't easy to explain these matters clearly. Aman used the simplest and most direct method. He held a cup of wine and looked at Gomang and Zhen Shui, saying, "In my kingdom, I'm the only god." This sentence contained a piece of information. It was not forcefully imprinted into the soul, but was accompanied by the voice of an immortal. The so-called immortal's witty words was the mysterious method that the two children had used when they were talking just now. Aman's achievements were higher than theirs, and he could use it with a single thought. Great Wishksiddhigarba had used a similar method to communicate with him, but at that time, Aman had not comprehended it thoroughly. And this information was unimaginably complex. Apart from some confidential details that should not or were inconvenient to say, Aman told her everything about his life. From the time he grew up in Duk to the moment he sat in the rose garden, the stories of all kinds of people and gods he had met were all told to him. However, Aman only showed a simple display so that the two children could understand what he had seen and heard. Even so, ordinary deities would not be able to handle such a huge amount of information in a short period of time. If the soul was not unimaginably powerful, Aman's direct imprinting of this information would cause a kind of harm. So Aman used the other party's witty words as a reference. How much the other party could understand, and accept depended on themselves. He was also testing how powerful the souls of the two children were and how long it would take for them to react. Gomang held the cup, his hands stopped in mid-air as if frozen. After a long time, he put the cup down. Aman was slightly taken aback. Although the little boy's realm was not as high as his, the strength of his soul was beyond his imagination. It was no less than any angel in the kingdom. Looking at True Water again, Aman was even more surprised. Only when Gomang put down the cup did Aman notice her. It turned out that the little girl had been blinking her eyes at some point in time, as if she was recalling something. "You are very open." Aman smiled. "I have nothing to hide." "Gomang, thank you." Aman, you're welcome, it's because I would like to consult you. Aman's frankness in sharing his experiences gave Gomang a lot to learn from him. The reason why Aman had brought Metatro with him on a tour of the Khitan Peninsula was to use this method to allow his disciples to seek enlightenment. Although Gomang and Truewater didn't participate in it personally, they could learn a lot from a bystander's perspective. Having received such a heavy gift from Aman, Gomang couldn't not return the favor. He put down the cup and said, I don't know what you want to ask me, but feel free to ask. I'll tell you everything I know. However, this sentence contained a hint of information. Aman could only ask questions related to his own experiences and not about Gomang and Truewater. Aman's first question was a little odd because he wasn't asking himself. Instead, he asked thoughtfully, May I know what Zeus seeks? Gomang answered, the pinnacle of the quasi-golden immortal realm. What was the pinnacle of the golden immortal realm? Gomang gave a detailed explanation. With the ability to open up one's beer, one could form an immortal abode in a boundless and profound world. Those who attained great freedom were known as golden immortals. As for the pinnacle of the golden immortal realm, not only did it form a world of its own, it could also allow a golden immortal world to attach itself to it. The beer could see the essence of knowledge and the seal of immortality. Beyond the immortal abode, there would be a Tao venue, making it an immortal world. Due to the different paths he sought, what Zeus sought might not be what Gomang referred to as an immortal world. However, the realm he sought was similar to the pinnacle of golden immortals. To be able to use the Olympus heavenly kingdom to contain another heavenly kingdom, fusing his soul imprint with his cultivation insights, allowing the Olympus heavenly kingdom to expand in depth and extension, Zeus was the true god of gods. Aman could not help but nod. So that's the so-called god of gods. And what realm am I seeking? Gomang's answer was very straightforward, leaving Aman somewhat disappointed. It's not something I know, so I'm not allowed to enjoy it. Back in Amat's great prophecy, the heavens' pivot continent would give birth to a god of gods. And Artemis believed that Zeus or Aman had already attained the status of a god of gods, fulfilling the prophecy. However, after hearing Gomang's explanation, Aman realized that he and Zeus had yet to truly seek confirmation. Only by reaching the pinnacle of quasi-golden immortals that Gomang mentioned could one be called a god of gods. As for Aman's vow, that wasn't the case. Or rather, it wasn't just that. He wanted to transcend this realm. However, transcending this realm also required him to experience this realm. Among the angels he guided, if one reached his current accomplishments, they would be able to establish a heavenly kingdom in undying eternity, becoming what Gomang referred to as a quasi-golden immortal. If that day came and Aman was still the one god, he would be able to fuse his heavenly kingdom with his disciples' worlds. That would be equivalent to seeking confirmation of the god of gods. As for higher realms, Gomang had heard of them, but he was unable to explain them to Aman. At that moment, he took the initiative to introduce his own accomplishments. In the distant east, Gomang was a manifestation of a certain immortal's thoughts. He had great divine powers and insight, but that immortal had yet to attain golden immortal status. Therefore, Gomang's realm was at the true immortal materialization realm. It could be understood as the pinnacle of the Creator's achievements, as well as being able to materialize unique mountains and rivers out of the void. When immortals reached the true immortal materialization realm, they would have the same means as the Creator, allowing them to create a world in undying eternity. However, that wasn't what they sought. Their views were also very interesting. Such a world existed in the soul, and it could exist as one wished or not. There was no need to really create one and leave it there. It was just a means of verification. It was just like how people could make a strange painting and then enter the mountains and rivers in the painting to travel. However, a painting was just a painting and not the real mountains and rivers. What the painter sought confirmation was the technique of the brush, not the content of the painting itself. This was the confirmation of the immortals. If not, then it would be another path of seeking confirmation, and it could not be called the immortals. It could be Mahayana, or the Buddhists, or the creators of the various divine clans of the original continent, or the archangels that Aman was now guiding. Similar realms, different desires. This wasn't just a difference in views or ideas, but also a difference in cultivation. Since Gomang had taken the initiative to introduce the immortal realms, Aman took the opportunity to ask, the true immortal materialization realm is the pinnacle of the creator. Beyond that is seeking confirmation as a golden immortal. As for the various ancient god systems of the heavens pivot continent, above the creators are the gods of creation. What do you think of the gods of creation's achievements? Gomang shook his head and said, the archangels in your kingdom will no longer seek confirmation as the gods of creation. Under your guidance, they will directly seek confirmation of your current realm as a golden immortal. As for what the gods of creation are, I'm not sure. Immortals who have the beer transformation technique but are trapped in their own web and seek freedom are not even thinking about it. But according to what you said, the creation of a god system is the end of human desires. If this is what one seeks, it can be considered a suitable goal. However, this is really the end. If there is anything else, there is no way to go unless you vow to cultivate from the beginning again. Gomang didn't know about the gods of creation's achievements in the past, but after hearing Aman's introduction, he understood. He clearly told Aman that this was a dead end. It was fine if this was the goal of the gods, but if there was anything else, there was no way out. As an immortal, he wouldn't have such thoughts, so he didn't know. Aman nodded wistfully. Mr. Gomang, you're right. Back then, Anu and Allah encountered such an encounter and ultimately chose to vow to cultivate from the beginning again. They only understood after various attempts, but you actually pointed it out with a single sentence. Gomang smiled. It's not that I'm better, but that our paths are different. Although I haven't proven my path, I know what it is. Gomang's situation was different from Aman's. Although his realm was only equivalent to the peak of the creators, he knew what higher pursuits were. Although he hadn't done it yet, he knew what he had to do. Aman had always been exploring on his own. He was a pioneer and had no existing path to refer to. It was the same for Anu and Allah back then. Perhaps it wasn't that they didn't want to seek confirmation as the Lord of Heaven, but they didn't know how. They naturally reached the end of human desires and created a god system to become the gods of creation. With the ancient gods of creation as a reference, there were other gods who swore their vows. Isis failed, but Zeus and Ammon succeeded. Following that, Ammon finally asked a crucial question. Mr. Gomang, what do you think of the domain of the source of divine power? Gomang answered plainly, the way of the ghostly cultivators. It was as if the soul had found a glimmer of light in the darkness. Not only did it explain why Gomang and Zhen Shui didn't claim to be of the supernatural, but it also explained the fundamental difference in ideology between the gods of the heavens pivot continent and the immortals that Gomang called immortals. It also solved a knot that had been troubling Ammon. This time, it was Ammon's turn to be stunned. He sat there with a cup of wine in his hand for a long time. He didn't regain his senses for a long time. Gomang's words seemed to come from another world. From his point of view, regardless of whether one achieved transcendence and eternal life, be it before or after becoming a god, the so-called domain of the source of divine power was simply dispensable. And the immortal who had transformed a wisp of his thoughts into Gomang had never had a domain of the source of divine power. Instead, he used the mortal world as his Tao arena. Gomang didn't deny the usefulness of the domain of the source of divine power for gods. As for the various benefits, Ammon was well aware of them. Now that he was the prime god of Igut, there was naturally no need to elaborate. Interestingly, Gomang was also well aware of it. Furthermore, he had seen many living beings cultivate in such a manner. However, an immortal like him had never deliberately pursued such a path. Among the cultivators Gomang had seen, there were spirits, demons, and spirits. They flaunted their divine powers, or claimed miracles, to guide or bewitch believers in the mortal world to build temples and build societies to offer sacrifices. There were also great achievements and meritorious deeds in the mortal world. The people were grateful for their kindness and built temples and built societies to offer sacrifices. There were many shaman-gu gods among the people, and it was difficult to distinguish them. By receiving the incense offerings of the mortal world and borrowing the power of the people's wishes to cultivate, it allowed the Een spirit to take form and the spirits to obtain dharmic powers. This was also the so-called power to repair the soul of the gods. There were also immortals who established their Tao arenas in the mortal world, similar to the temples of the heaven's pivot continent. It might have the effects of a temple, but it wasn't used for the purpose of a temple. The primary purpose of establishing a Tao arena was to pass down the teachings of the Dharma and guide those who were fated. The secondary purpose was to look down on the world and gain knowledge. This was equivalent to what gods meant by absorbing the souls of the mortal world to gain knowledge. As for those who specialized in ghosts and gods, it was a heterodox path. Heterodox paths were not the true path. They could be used, but they couldn't be proven. Upon hearing this, Amon completely understood something. The so-called domain of the source of divine power could be enjoyed after attaining the 9th level of the power of origins. It allowed one to absorb the power to repair the soul, listen to prayers, and investigate everything in the divine domain. However, the achievements of gods didn't originate from this. At times, it was just a symbol of status and benefits. For example, Horus was once the prime god of the Ennead divine domain, making him very powerful. He was nearly omniscient in the divine domain. This might be a form of help to verify higher achievements, but it in itself didn't represent the achievements and realms of a god. When Seth chased Horus off his position as prime god, Horus didn't really make any progress during his long years as prime god. He was still the same god. Did Amon becoming the prime god of Igut help his cultivation? Of course. When his body and soul were injured, he could recover faster, and he could learn more about the mortal world at any time. However, was it because he became a prime god that he sought the realm of the Lord of Heaven? No, of course not. In terms of means, the ghostly cultivation method that Gomang mentioned was no different from the nature of the divine domain that these gods enjoyed. Generally speaking, there was no need to achieve the 9th level in order to be called a god. Any demon or spirit with a bit of skill could borrow it, as long as it could make people set up temples and offer sacrifices. It was just that such a god did not have endless vitality. Therefore, when Murin called Gomang a god, in this immortal's concept, he was actually categorizing him as a demon or spirit. Of course, he would shake his head and deny it. What was a god? According to Gomang's understanding, those who used it were gods. The so-called divine domain was equivalent to the cup of nectar that Wendy poured for true water in his eyes. Gomang believed that the gods in the temples of the heavens pivot continent could be called the god of virtuous virtue. To mortals, it was a symbol of unfathomable. The guidance that Gomang received was the way of the Supreme. The Supreme said, when the way descends upon the world, its ghosts are not gods, and its gods do not harm people. In other words, the guidance that mortals received was just a belief, and it had nothing to do with the statue on the altar. What kind of god a god would become depended on what he was doing and what he was pursuing. The divine domain was both the goal and the result. The power of the origin didn't include the ghostly cultivation method, but the gods of Olympus were fighting for the divine domain and attempting to expand it. Although their achievements were already very high, they still relied on the ghostly cultivation method. Hearing this, Amon couldn't help but re-examine his own experience. He had also built a divine domain, such as Tsangleng and today's Igut. It wasn't that he had to do so, but that was what the gods did, so he naturally did so, and there were indeed many gains and benefits. But now that he thought about it, the main reason for each breakthrough in the realm was not this. Perhaps Marduk also understood this. He transformed into Darius and established the Pot's Empire, pushing the Great Light Realm to the entire heaven's pivot continent. The main purpose was to verify the Mahasvara he created. After the verification, Marduk left, as if he no longer cared about the Pot's Empire, and no one knew that the Great Light God was Marduk or Bushuan. And Zeus seemed to be vaguely thinking about this problem. He wanted to unify the divine domain of Olympus and expand it to the extreme. This was also the pursuit of the ultimate achievement. As for how his reputation in the world was, Zeus didn't seem to care. Now that Ammon understood, what should he do? There was no need to give up the divine domain, just as there was no need for a person to throw away all his family's money in order to prove that he was not greedy, and there was no need to prove this to anyone. He could still have his divine domain, but he could look at it from another perspective. He didn't want to become such a god. No matter how powerful he was, he had to wait for an opportunity, and to realize his vow would inevitably have to pay a great price. Chapter 334. Gomang picked up the 2 thin wooden sticks on the table and picked up a piece of meat. He said slowly, "Of course. I'm now cultivating the Tao imparted by the Grand Supreme. Above the pinnacle of golden immortals is the realm of 3 begets all things and the Grand Supreme Oblivion. For example, your and my achievements can be considered, but the Grand Supreme Oblivion is already indescribable." Murin, who had been silent all this while, interrupted in amazement, "No achievements to speak of. Then what was the Grand Supreme like that you saw?" Gomang answered, "The Grand Supreme can't be seen, so I don't know if I've seen him. If you can really meet someone at the Zenith Heaven realm, you might not know who he is, or he doesn't know who you are, or he doesn't know who you are, or he doesn't know who you are, or you don't know who you are." Murin blinked. "Doesn't that mean I can't see him?" True Water interjected softly, "It doesn't mean I can't see him, but everything is possible." Ammon had the fortune to see immeasurable light. Back then, immeasurable light wanted to guide him, but Ammon didn't leave. Lion King ran off with Manjushri. Ammon recalled the scene and said in enlightenment, "I was fortunate enough to see immeasurable light." His realm was already above the pinnacle of golden immortals. Then, Manjushri, who took away Lion King, is his achievement also what you call a quasi-golden immortal? One Gomang nodded. Bodhisattva Manjushri can also be said to be a quasi-golden immortal, but his vows are different. Actually, you are extremely blessed, something I've never seen in my life. You brushed shoulders with immeasurable light, but you were still able to create a heavenly kingdom. Back then, immeasurable light might have come to the west to seek the vows of Ksitigarbha. Meeting you was wonderful, and Ksitigarbha later sought the vows of Bodhisattva in front of you. You asked what realm it was to surpass the gods. Instead of asking me, why don't you ask True Water? She has already sought the vows of a golden immortal, while I'm still at the true immortal materialization realm. One Ammon was shocked once again. The person who had penetrated the Garden of Eden's spatial enchantment was Gomang, the person who had broken his spell was Gomang, the person who had withstood Gabriel's blade of order was Gomang, and the person who had been sitting at the banquet and speaking with confidence was Gomang. Therefore, his attention had always been on the little boy. Only now did he know that the little girl, Zhen Shui, had achieved even more and had already become a golden immortal. In terms of realm, she was not below him or Zeus. This was a surprise. Zhen Shui was holding the cup with both hands, drinking the nectar with relish. Seeing Ammon looking at her, she raised her head and said innocently, "Those like Taishang and immeasurable light have attained the state of grand luo and grand enlightenment." It's hard to explain, and it's useless to talk about it. As long as you are sitting here talking to us, you cannot prove it. As long as you are giving your word on earth, you cannot prove it. Don't ask me how to verify it. I don't know. Even if I knew, I wouldn't be able to say it. But I can tell you that it has nothing to do with cultivation. It requires a great aspiration. Whether such a great aspiration can be realized does not depend on how advanced your cultivation is or how profound your dharmic powers are. Such a great opportunity probably requires the tribulations of the mortal world and the heavens. It's not something an immortal can decide for himself. One Ammon seemed to understand, but he seemed to be even more confused. With a wry smile, he asked a question that he could clearly ask. Just now, Mr. Gomang mentioned that Bodhisattva is also a golden immortal. May I ask if Bodhisattva can create a heavenly kingdom out of nothing like me? One Zhenshui blinked her big eyes and answered, the golden immortal realm is not about creating something out of nothing, but turning nothing into something. The Bodhisattva realm is not about creating something out of nothing either. According to them, it should be about creating something out of nothing. Nothing is not nothing, and emptiness is not nothing. Your heavenly kingdom is formed in your soul as you cultivate. It can only be revealed when you experience the heavenly tribulation of manifestation, isn't it? One Gomang pointed at Amon and said to Zhenshui, Amon's heavenly tribulation of manifestation is really dangerous. He fused the Anunnaki and the Ennead, and if there was the slightest mistake, he would have fallen immediately. Yet, he didn't realize it and just passed through. This is also the credit of Anu and Allah. If it weren't for the two gods of creation's vow to help Amon, he wouldn't have succeeded. What a great blessing! Amon understood what Gomang meant. The heavenly tribulation of manifestation that he mentioned was the test to verify the identity of the Lord of the heavenly kingdom. Isis had fallen in such a test. Amon didn't have any lingering fear. He just smiled and said, this is the situation of the founder. I didn't know it at the time, and I will only understand it later. Now I'm thinking about something else. If I want to finally fulfill my vow, will I fall in a greater test? One Murin grabbed his hand and said, what nonsense are you talking about? But Gomang said indifferently, falling in itself is one of the results of seeking confirmation. What you seek is what you wish for. You should understand this before you become a god. If you hesitate after becoming a god, then you can't have a true great ambition. If you don't, then so be it. You're not bad as you are now. Amon smiled again. He filled Gomang's cup and drank a cup of wine himself. As if talking to himself, he said, I won't do that before none of my disciples has achieved the achievement of the Lord of the heavenly kingdom. Because I promised the heavenly kingdom to the angels like Allah or Anu. If my vow can become a true great ambition, just as Zhenshui said, it doesn't depend entirely on me. But if one day I fulfill my vow, I wonder what will happen. One Zhenshui said, Supreme Oblivion is not heartless. Transcending a ghostly cultivator doesn't mean that you are no longer a ghostly cultivator. You may become the greatest ghostly cultivator among the immortals of the heavens. Even if you have transcended, the foundation of a god like you is still the same. I can't say for sure. Brother Gomang, you are good at divination. If it's as Amon says, what will happen if he can fulfill the great ambition? One Gomang shook his head and said, this matter can't be divined. It's better to observe the world and speak frankly. Amon, your statue will crumble and be trampled by your believers. Those who claim to believe in you will become enemies with each other, calling each other heretical. This doesn't depend on you at the time, but on the soil of the world that gave birth to you. The path you point out leads to the heavenly kingdom, but it's a cup of water in everything. From the perspective of human nature, the struggles of the world are the same. I have nothing more to say. These two children were really direct with their words. They didn't give him any face at all. Amon said with a wry smile, those who believe in me may not enter the heavenly kingdom, but those who follow me will enter the heavenly kingdom. After saying this, Amon fell silent for a moment. Gomang and Zhenshui had answered all the questions they could, and those they couldn't. Amon was thinking about the inevitable conflict with the Olympian divine clan in the future, and he suddenly felt enlightened. Amon didn't say anything, but Murin took the opportunity to ask, since Amon's vow can't be proven, what I seek should be proven, right? One Zhenshui asked with a smile, what do you want to prove? One Murin, an angel like me has no wish to live in the eternal kingdom, but in my early years as the Anunnaki's goddess of youth and love, I always wanted to have my own creator's world. Later, I became an angel, and I still want to become an archangel, which is similar to but different from the realm of the creator. In your opinion, how can I fulfill my wish? Gabriel suddenly interrupted and reminded, Murin, you should ask Amon such a question. Murin smiled. Yes, my God has already given me guidance, and I just want to ask these two distant friends what they think of this. Didn't Amon also ask his question? Why are you looking at me like that? Is it strange? 1. Gomang and Zhen Shui put down their cups and looked at Murin with a puzzled look. Zhen Shui nudged Gomang and said, Brother Gomang, you are far better at discussing the Tao than I am, just tell her. Gomang shrugged. What's there to tell? I'm not the creator, nor am I an archangel. If we're talking about immortality, she's already at the realm of immortality. Fortune and cultivation are both sufficient, and it's just a thought away. She's the one who didn't react in time. Does she need to ask for the well-being of others when she's drinking water? Murin was confused. She was sure that Zhen Shui was easier to talk to than Gomang, so she said, Immortal Zhen Shui, what are you talking about? From what you're saying, are you saying that I can become an archangel with a thought? Zhen Shui blinked and returned with a question. Your attainment is already at the realm of immortality. Do you still need to ask me? Gomang couldn't stand it any further. He pointed at Wendy and asked, Sister, how old are you this year? Wendy was very obedient and docile. Knowing that she couldn't interrupt, she sat by the side and listened. She didn't expect there to be anything else. Gomang's question left her stunned. Wendy thought for a long time before answering, I forgot. She had indeed forgotten that Wendy had been living carefreely in the rose garden for the past few decades. She didn't know how much time had passed, nor did she know how long it had been. She wasn't a god that transcended eternal life, but her youthfulness didn't fade. How did such a miraculous thing happen? The most crucial reason wasn't Amon's divine arts. Gomang looked at Murin and said, You sought proof of your powers in the temple and once used Amon to restore your divine domain in Ling City. Amon also erected statues of you in the various temples of Igut, allowing you to absorb souls. In terms of dermic powers and cultivation, your powers are already sufficient. But as the goddess of youth and love, what was the original meaning of your vow? What is your symbol in the mortal world? You did not seek proof in the temple, but in the rose garden. The garden has been verified. May I ask where the miracle of Wendy came from? 1. What did Gomang mean? Wendy's eternal youth wasn't only due to Amon's efforts. It was mainly because of the miraculous Murin's rose garden. Murin had built this rose garden. There were flowers that didn't wilt in the 4 seasons, and it was far away from the troubles of the mortal world. It also had magical powers that silently blessed Wendy. This divine palace contained the wishes of its creator. Murin's rose garden was so miraculous. Wendy was pure and had a clear mind. She didn't awaken her origins, but she silently accepted the blessings. It was like a rebirth, even though she was still a mortal. Wasn't this the world that the goddess of youth and love sought proof of? Seeing Wendy today meant that Murin had already done it. Going back to the previous analogy, some people could create a miraculous painting and travel the mountains and rivers in the painting, but immortals pursued the technique of the brush and not the painting itself. Now, this painting and the person in the painting were present. It was the Wendy in the rose garden. Then, Murin, who created this miracle, naturally possessed a realm similar to that of a true immortal. Why didn't Murin realize it herself? This ancient god was still stuck in the confusion of the creator. She also opened up a rose garden in heaven, but the angels in heaven all enjoyed eternal youth, and no changes could be seen. Moreover, the achievement of an archangel was not dependent on heaven to open up a closed world. This was a new guidance given by Amon, which was different from the original Anunnaki divine kingdom. Murin could already become an archangel, but if she wanted to truly become an archangel, she still needed this final self-awakening. Murin quietly pinched Amon beside her and secretly said in her soul, My God, you bad boy. Why didn't you enlighten me? Amon quietly replied, This kind of self-awakening, in fact, I don't need to say another word. When Wendy leaves the rose garden and enters heaven, your quest will naturally be complete. I didn't expect these 2 children to come today, so it is fate that they have enlightened you. Just as they spoke, the aura emitted by Murin and the entire rose garden quietly underwent an indescribable change. In just a moment, she had become an archangel from heaven to the human world. Murin smiled happily. Two guests from afar, how should I thank you? I heard that you are here in search of strange flowers and herbs. There are many in my rose garden, you can take whatever you like. As long as you have the ability, you can even move this rose garden away. Wen Zhenshui also smiled happily and waved her little hand. We are just a manifestation of a thought, and although we are in the realm of great magic, we do not have the power of immortals, so we do not have the ability to move this paradise back to Kunlun. Wen Gomang frowned and said, are you serious? Wen Murin nodded and said, of course I am serious. Wen Gomang then turned to ask Zhenshui, do you like it here? Wen Zhenshui also nodded, of course I like it. Wen Gomang then said to Murin, I can't move the rose garden, but I have to thank you for your kindness. As a token of gratitude, I will demonstrate to you the mysterious methods of immortals. As he spoke, Gomang suddenly reached out towards Murin, as if to launch some kind of attack. But Murin and Aman sat still. The strange aura of this archangel and the entire rose garden seemed to be grasped in Gomang's hand, condensing into a strange object. It was half the height of a man and seemed to be made of pure, transparent crystal. It was long and slender in the middle and curved at both ends. The bottom was the base, and the top was like a plate that held water. The whole thing looked like an exceptionally exquisite crystal plate without any impurities. Gomang placed it on the ground beside him. The magic formation that enveloped the rose garden, the space where the rose garden was located, and the prayers contained in the rose garden that Murin had created fused seamlessly with the crystal plate. Scanning the crystal plate with a detection spell was equivalent to scanning the entire rose garden. After the crystal plate was placed, a plate of clear water condensed in it. Gomang pointed at the plate of clear water and said, this is a true immortal creation. It contains the essence of the rose garden's spiritual pivot. A person with a pure heart can sense this prayer and see it. Drinking it can preserve one's youth. Wen Murin exclaimed, this is too miraculous. Aren't you a manifestation of a wisp of your mind, without any immortal dermic powers? How did you do it? Gomang shook his head. What's so miraculous about it to you? It's not my achievement, but yours. I'm only turning illusory into reality, condensing the spiritual pivot here into this object. The spring of youth in this plate isn't a manifestation of my dermic powers, but a manifestation of the blessings of the rose garden. Only with this magical rose garden can I condense the spring of youth. And this Wendy has never drunk it like this. Isn't it preserving one's youth as well? Murin praised, spring of youth, what a good name. I'm not talking about this spring, but your hand. Wen Zhenshui said with a smile, Brother Gomang's hand is adept at catching the tail of the wind and absorbing the myriad dharma in the world. Do you now know how impressive it is? Every immortal's cultivation level is different. Although Brother Gomang has yet to become a golden immortal, his means are unique. You don't have to find it too miraculous. It's just another way to display your achievements. Gabriel narrowed his eyes and suddenly interjected. Gomang, can this spring of youth have the same miraculous effects if placed elsewhere? Gomang shook his head. No, this isn't my work, but Murin's. What I've conjured is just a means. Gabriel asked again, then how can it be done? Gomang thought for a moment before answering, have an achievement that isn't inferior to Murin's. Understand its miraculous effects, find another grotto heaven, cast a spell, and place the spiritual pivot there. Those with pure hearts can see the spring of youth. That's equivalent to creating another rose garden. If that's all, it's just a beautiful plate. He then turned to ask Zhenshui, do you like the spring of youth? We can take it away. Zhenshui shook her head. It's such a beautiful thing, just leave it here. If we take it away, it won't be the spring of youth anymore. Besides, the spring of youth is useless to us. Zhenshui was speaking the truth. The spring of youth sounded miraculous, but it was useless to oracles who had passed the test of endless life. It was even more useless to those who had transcended eternal life. Furthermore, the requirement to place it was so high that it would just be a crystal plate once it left the rose garden. Gomang waved his hand. Then leave it here for now. 1. Wendy clapped. Thank you for placing such a beautiful spring here. Gomang smiled. No need to thank me. It's here to begin with, and you've already drunk from it. I'm only letting you see it. Rather than thanking me, why not thank Murin? It symbolizes this archangel's request for confirmation. 1. Murin said in embarrassment, I don't know how to thank you for such a demonstration. Gomang replied, didn't you say that I could take any flower I wanted? I'll go find out what I need now. He waved his sleeves, and the silver light turned into 2 little bees, buzzing as they flew into the bushes. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.